I'd like to convene a meeting of the Menlo Park Fire Protection District Board of Directors at 7:13 on June 20th, 2022. Roll call, please. Director Crawley, present. Director Bloom.
Here.
Director Bernstein.
Present.
Director Jones.
Here.
Director Solano.
Here.
Great, thank you. So now we'll do the So now, I will open up public comment, for public comment number 1. Anyone who would like to make a public comment for items not on the agenda, this is your time to do so. Have any public comments, Michelle? Any public comment cards, any public comments online? Then I will close the public comment and then we'll go to the report of the fire chief. Mark, which is item 1.
Perfect. Thank you, Director Crawley, members of the board, and for our staff that's here, the community that's zooming in and watching. Thank you for joining us at our June board meeting. To begin with, I'm going to give you a quick update on facilities, not super lengthy. Station 4, we're still projected at end of July, hopefully be complete, which means that maybe by September-ish is when we'll start looking at and trying to figure out and open what would be great. Station 3 auxiliary building is in progress. The grading has started to occur. And then separately, I won't get into great detail on this, but just an update. The facilities ad hoc committee met for the first time today. I would imagine they'll be able to report out from the committee during the ad hoc. With that, I would like to introduce our new employees. I'm sure much to their chagrin, I'm going to make them each come up here and stand in the middle, and hopefully I forewarned them to give about from there. Let's introduce themselves and talk a little bit about them. We start from our employee that's been on like. We have 4 today that we're recognizing. The one that's been here the longest is Young Min Song. So, Young Min, if you would come up, you have to come up here. Yeah, they were all they can sit back there and do that. That way we can capture you on our Zoom. It's right here in the middle. I always look at the board and say hi to them and introduce yourself. Give a little bit of your background and where you're working.
Yeah, hi, my name is Yong Song, and I was an intern at Menlo Park for 1.5 years. And my job title is fire inspection, inspector, and fire investigation. And for right now, I'm mostly taking care of the basement and the solar battery system. And I also speak Korean and a little bit of Japanese here. So if you have any question or any language trouble, you're appropriate to contact.
Thank you. Awesome. And our next staff member that I'm going to introduce is Heather Keller. She's been with us for a few months, but we're doing a little catch up here.
Yeah.
Right.
Heather Keller, community volunteer coordinator. I've been here just about 3 months. Have had a few different pathways. I've been a teacher, worked at Packard Children's Hospital at Stanford, worked with PR agency and a startup. So that's my path that led me here. And also part of my CERT community in Redwood City where I live. So that was a great background to join this effort. So I'm excited to be here. Mom of twin boys also. I've had that in also. So thank you.
Yeah. And next, staff member that we added was Bertha Hernandez. Bertha goes by Bertie.
Okay, hello everybody, Bertha Hernandez. I actually have lived in the Bay Area all of my life, for 5 years, because I was born in El Salvador. I have worked in South San Francisco. I worked there for 27 years and kind of moved between being a clerk to the city, to within the city clerk's office, and actually ended up my stint in South San Francisco in the fire department. Some of the things that I did while at the fire department were some EMS analytics, as well as transport and a lot of the program management having to do with sorry, I'm nervous. A lot of program management having to do with deployments. So I'm no stranger to a lot of the reimbursements that come through FEMA. And that's exactly what I'll be doing here. I'm doing here in the Melbourne Fire District, kind of walking the footsteps of Amy, who has been great. So I hope to continue that and, you know, make sure that her legacy continues and all the great work she's done is fulfilled. Thank you.
Chief Magallanes is up there in South San Francisco. It's barely talking to you right now. Really acquired one of his most valuable players, lucky for us. And then finally, our last score is Tori Lee.
So my name is Tori Lee. I have about 7 years of experience in public sector. I started in my career at Santa Clara, doing a lot of recruitment. Started doing some public safety, police hiring and things like that. 2.5 years ago, I started working at the city of Mountain View, where I was introduced to firefighter recruitment, which will kind of push me into this path. I do a lot of recruitment. I've done FMLA, a lot of training. So I'm looking forward to, you know, learning more workers' comp and everything. So, thank you.
Thank you to the board of you for letting us put you on the spot. I really wanted to introduce you to our board that helps the organization and share with the community that zooms in on all the wonderful new staff that we've added, and welcome you to our fire camps. So you are more than welcome to sit here for the next 4 or 5 or 6 hours. And I want to want to speak out whenever's convenient for you, but yeah, thank you for coming. Continuing on, just down our recruitment and hiring update. The community risk reduction officer there, just an update, we're still having ongoing conversations with AFSCME about changing the classifications of that. As soon as we can get that locked in, our plan is to recruit for that position and add to that new community engagement and resilience team that's going to be part of Jones staff. We have a current recruitment that we're in the process of a senior IT analyst. Ralph is going to be retiring in August, I believe, and so he gave us enough notice of an opportunity to start recruitment before he left, which was great. We had, I believe, 22 candidates, and we are down to 6 right now that are going to move forward in the interview process. So we're looking forward to interviewing some really highly qualified candidates. Update on the firefighter recruitment. We have application process closed. The written exam has been administered. We had approximately 250 candidates apply, and we are now waiting for the grading process to take place, and we'll come back and let you know at the next board meeting how many candidates are going to move on to the next step. The next step will be everybody that has a passing score, it's pass-fail exam, will move on to structured oral interviews that will be done via video recording through a service called SparkFire. So recorded interviews, that way we cast a really wide net. We'll be rating them with internal raters, and the top groups will move on to in-person oral interviews. So this is part of a bigger process to just cast a really wide net, and we have a candidate pool that's reflective of the communities that we protect. Yes.
When will the be?
This is for spring of 2024. So February, March, is that something? Somewhere. How many positions? Right now, we're estimating 6. Right, it's always hard to tell, you're not sure who's gonna end up retiring. And people sometimes they somewhat secretive about their retirement plan, but we're shooting for 6, we're gonna have enough candidates, so should more retire, we'll have ability to go. Moving on to other items. Mark Gucci retirement, both Chief Shepelman and I went to Sacramento. I remember when that was 3 or 4 weeks ago, to honor Mark Gucci, who is the California director who retired. Great event. Harold presented Mark with a plaque on behalf of the district and shared some wonderful stories about things that went back. Mark has such longstanding roots here in East Palo Alto as a paramedic and the formation of the task force, so that was great. Along with that, I think I shared with the board that before Mark retired, we created 3 new positions on the fire code board of directors. One of which I was fortunate to be appointed to, that's for small, medium fire departments north. So it'd be great to have representation there from organizations like us. Still have some say in what happens at the state level. It would just be really great for continuing Menlo Park's prominence in the state of California in fire service with the task force, et cetera. So good news. We had a retiree lunch was about a week and a half ago. Nicely attended. Just gave them some updates. Always nice to see some of our old faces there. Really great group of individuals that still appreciate being connected with this really great fire. I also happened to have lunch with the police chiefs up at the Alpine Inn, which I've never been to. Great neat spot, a lot of history. That was our newly appointed East Palo Alto Police Chief Jeff Liu, and then Chief McCauley and Chief Morris from Atherton and Menlo Park, and then also Sheriff Assistant Chief, and I'm blanking on his name, but we just talked about, what was his name? Ryan, it was Ryan. Talked about relevant issues, talked about a lot of conversation about just upcoming 4th of July, with our continuing ongoing fireworks issues and how we're going to navigate that, work together. Good conversation, good relationship. Mid-Peninsula volunteers have scheduled this is a ride along that got derailed back when we had their event that Director Crowley and I went to, so that's been rescheduled. So they're kind of a Meals on Wheels program, so it's just kind of a connection with our community, and we're going to be participating in their 75th anniversary open house over at the West. The staff office members, it's just to share with you some changes that are happening as we have some expansion to the staff, and we're expanding more into the yellow house. We've set up some new office and cubicles upstairs and then there's a conference room. Trying to provide all of our staff with the ability to have their own private space. Right now, we have quite a few actually shared offices. And we have some space to move into, so we're currently in the process of doing that. Retirements and promotions, as was mentioned by Bertha, Ingress has retired, and Bertha is now fully at the helm of the task force in that position. We also had Greg Womble that notified us of his retirement effective May 11th. And because of Greg's retirement, we're promoting David Kennedy to fire captain until the end of that period. So a couple other things that are going on are new engines. We anticipate that beginning in mid-July, we'll start placing a number of them in service. So really excited to do that. We finally have all the radios figured out as well as all of the new equipment that you can go on there. Have dealt with supply chain issues as well as market issues here and leaking water. So fortunately, I think I had mentioned in the past, the torrential rains had some advantages to us, and that it showed us before we put them in service that all 6 of them had some leaks that the manufacturer had to take care of. We also have a teen CERT program that's going to begin on July 31st at Station 1. It's geared towards 15 to 18-year-olds, so, and a neat way to connect our youth with our community and help, start putting them in that mindset of helping be prepared. And then just a little bit on some of the DEI initiatives we've been doing since our last meeting. We had a Juneteenth celebration by sharing some kind of cool history about African American firefighters in the fire service. And then we also had a pride recognition with sharing some information and some kind of treats that we sent out to all the fire stations. So again, just trying to provide some awareness and conversations, we create an environment where everybody's. That concludes my fire chief report. Are there any questions?
I have two. Could you share with us what the plans are on fireworks and reminding the problems like this start?
Yes, yeah. I mean, that's mostly a law enforcement issue. I mean, they are out trying to, and confiscate and beyond that, there's no great plan to reduce the number of fireworks except community education. We are going to be staffing up on the 4th of July as this is all of law enforcement, but according to Chief Lou in East Palo Alto, the fireworks shows have already started and begun are under. So there's no significant plans that I'm aware of that are going to be able to reduce the numbers other than active law enforcement and engagement.
Is it going to be active law enforcement?
They are, they have, yes, so that's their plans. They always have challenges because in order to cite somebody, you actually have to see them in the actual act of lighting, holding on to, or whatever. So usually by the time law enforcement gets there, everybody's got their hands in their pockets and they're able to do very much. So that was part of the conversation we had at lunch, was the challenges to the enforcement part of it, that they will, as much as they can, confiscate, and when they confiscate, they turn it over to the fire department. And then we work with the state of California, the governor's office of emergency services to disclose anybody. Yeah,
That's not what I observed. When I walked up there from my house, I see a police officer sitting in a squad car surrounded by maybe 50 or 60 residents. 3 or 4 of them were shooting off fireworks, and the police officer was just watching. There's no confiscation, there's no arrest, there's no action at all. I would guess that that's what the orders are from the top, that there shouldn't be any arrests.
That's in the Williams.
Yeah.
I'll check the chief orders.
We've had arrests too. I mean, where it's actually set off the car alarms and neighbors that are asked about it. It was just like a couple of times over the weekend, and they're afraid that there could be grass fires. It was global up there.
Another question about Robert.
Sorry.
I have 2 questions. I want to take back to the problem. In terms of we have put up a sign, a good sign, so no fire power that we deal with a first start of this in terms of just letting people know, everybody knows that our live part of stuff is really kind of post that. A couple of years ago, Chief Carroll and I, and there was 2 city council members met over at IKEA. And at IKEA, we talked to them about the possibility of utilizing some of the drones, to kind of do a first kind of start to kind of identify words, introduce some locations within the that there may be more investigation might take place.
And I know that Carol followed with them on that, and I don't even fire coach. If you probably haven't put together an approach on it, probably ever, you know, because he was part of that process then as well, as the student to reintroduce the idea of the notion of being, get some idea of where fireworks are at anyway, but there are several locations where you are. I think he has spot shotter kind of thing set up, but I'm not sure exactly how well that works. But as an added, assistant to shot fire, the possibility of utilizing drones to kind of do some reconnaissance like that, might be of some value to them. I know that the police officer and city councilman there thought it was a great idea, but there was no further movement. So I just wanted to all of those information to kind of see where it would be,
I didn't mean that to make that. Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I think the Jim was the mayor at that time. And I think that was around 2019.
as well as,
So just for your awareness, I have spoken to Chief Widow about, this is before he was appointed, about the possibility of using drones and yeah, some of the challenges that are associated with it. He hasn't come back to me since our conversation, but trying to navigate that fine line between being law enforcement. Right now, we have pretty free use of our drones because of what we use them for. And when we start using the fire district's drones over people's property to capture images and then against the law, we start going down a path that's could be challenging for us in our continued use of drone programs. I mean, these are normal conversations that are ongoing. And we do, we will frequently work with law enforcement. Like we did during the memorial and graduation, and the use of our drones for situation awareness for everybody's and safety. So it's that.
yeah, I think in terms of the interesting idea of where in terms of the department, in terms of I don't know what their idea in terms of trying to figure out whether that's a program you can sell or we need to think about and the consistency of the fire.
We very much offer our assistance as subject matter experts and things like that and supporting them. We were actually working with a town of Appleton on their drone implementation program. We have some really skilled people, and so, and same thing is true should East Palo Alto. And Chief Blue understands, the challenges that
Yeah, I just want to emphasize that I think there is a fire danger, but I think this is severe health risk. These things sometimes will go off. I'm talking about major explosions as late as 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. There are people there who work, different shifts at Sanford Hospital and so forth. For older people, wakes them up, they can get back to sleep. There's a number of veterans and so forth live there. So there are people with PTSD and I think it is really affects the quality of life. And, something needs to be done. The other question I have is, well, I want to ask you about the leaks, the equipment that these like leaks in the roof. Where are the leaks?
they were, and I don't know if that's where the wells were, but it was underneath, on top of the roof. It's lined with diamond plate, that silver material that you can see, in the, along the wheel wells of that engine over there. So during the torrential rains, the water somehow went underneath there and then found its way into the cabs. And so we found puddles of water. And so they had to pull out all the diamond plate and go back and I'm not sure if it was re-weld, re-caulk, but that's where it was. It was through the seams on the top of the fire engine cap.
And these aren't features that we have specially made for us, this would be on all fire engines, right?
Yeah. And it was, I don't know if it was a manufacturing defect because it was consistent for all 6 of our engines. It wasn't just a one. So there's been a design issue with that, and my guess is probably the majority of those that have ordered the same style of engine, they got training so far, say they should do it. Lucky to not have to take them to service. Yeah, so.
It's problematic, you're gonna spend $1 billion on an engine and it leaks, I mean, it's just, and we knew there was some quality issues with the manufacturer. That the mechanic was about, but then when they were ready to order all these things, we were assured that, oh, they solved all the quality issues and we wouldn't have that same problem. And the good news is we bought them all at one time, and means we can replace them all at one time. And hope the time comes, which isn't that far off. You know, in 7 or 8 years, we start to look at alternative vendors.
Yeah, if we, I mean, in general, I think our satisfaction with Pierce is pretty good, and we'll be able to evaluate the rest of it over time. But so during the manufacturing process, whatever the problem was, it was consistent with all of this.
And we've had, before we had problems with electrical system too, you know, when we don't have those problems.
I'm not aware of any other issues.
Regarding the team program, it's going to be happening at Station 1.
Yes.
Is that a closed program right now? I mean,
There's spots, I think, available for it. We just, within the last couple of days, put out the information. So when you say close, I mean,
in terms of that,
oh, I don't know that. I have to imagine there's a number as far as the max goes. I don't know. You know, we have a number, John?
I'm gonna gather it'll be between 20 and 30 will be the max. That's all we can hold in the classroom and match the instructor ratio.
so currently,
How many signed up?
That, I don't know how many signed up, but again, we just opened it, so
oh,
I'll have to look and see. We're trying to hit and recruit, obviously, at that team resource areas. See how it goes.
so is there, in terms of improvement, in terms of where, or if someone want to sign up, what should it do?
They need to go to the Menlo Wire Cert website, and there's also a QR code that's on the flyer we sent out, posted on our social media pages and through the email group that's on CERT. Hopefully, I believe it went out in that way. And then we're gonna be reaching out through normal media, so it should get posted in some of the local newspapers and their social media sites also.
What's the age requirement?
We're looking at the high school age, so between 14 and 18 years old.
All right, thank you. I remember when we first started the drone program and the situation came up with the privacy. So you have with the surveillance and stuff. John, do we have a SOP program as to how to handle the custody, or do we turn everything over, like if the police department want to use it? Do we turn everything over to them and they handle
Then custody, yes, we do have SOPs, so if it's our missions, then 100% of it's recorded and available for public records. If it's part of an investigation, then we'll follow our investigation policy. If it's something that we're working with another agency, then we hand over the chips to them directly so that we have no possession of that. And it follows the proper chain of custody per law, and we leave it in the hands of the law enforcement agency.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Chief.
Any other comments? Okay, thanks, Chief.
Thank you, Director.
Okay, we'll go on to presentations.
So I actually have asked for this to be on the agenda because for the last 3 years, we've not had in-person meetings. This is actually the first time we've had in-person meetings that started in February of this year. And because we didn't have in-person meetings, we really didn't, I didn't think that, we were able to properly give accommodations, and therefore our retired Chief Harold Chapman didn't receive one. But now that we're in person, I wanted to honor on behalf of the board, Chief Chapman at Station 6, because the Chapman Museum is here as well. So Harold, I wanted to present this commendation to you from the board, but I'm gonna read this. For a 40-year career, remarkable. I'm gonna do anything less than we did to do that and more, so I can did a lot of things. But we're so proud of where the fire district is right now, and on these people over the last 40 years, from the time you started your career until you retired in 2021. So this is a snapshot. I know you've done a lot more, but we try to highlight the highlights of your career. So whereas Harold Chapman has been an employee of the Menlo Park Fire Protection District since June 16, 1981, and whereas Harold Chapman retired from Menlo Park Fire Protection District on June 30th, 2021, after 40 years of service, and whereas Harold Chapman has been an integral part of the Menlo Park Fire Protection District as a firefighter, dispatcher, engine driver, rescue driver, truck driver, station captain, truck captain, staff captain, acting battalion chief, division chief, deputy chief, and was promoted to fire chief on January 1st, 2007, where he served as the fire chief for over 14 years and was affectionately known as Chief Harold. And whereas Harold Chapman has served on various state and federal committees related to logistics, training, standards, public information, and served as the chair of the FEMA Legal Issues Committee of the National Urban Search and Rescue Response System, as well as local task forces for homeless encampments and COVID response. And whereas Harold Chapman has responded to local, state, and national disasters of significance, including floods, wildland fires, and earthquakes in California, hurricanes Iniki and Katrina, the Oklahoma City bombing, the World Trade Center collapse on 9/11, Space Shuttle Columbia recovery operation, and the Chichi earthquake in Taiwan, to name a few. And whereas Harold Chapman has kept the residents of the Menlo Park Fire Protection District safe through innovative solutions and policies such as creating the Pandemic Emergency Response Unit, establishing the Unmanned Aerial System UAS drone program, designating primary emergency response routes to ensure timely emergency response, developing a partnership with USGS, Cal OES, and SkyAlert to install early earthquake detection and warning systems in our fire stations, and working in partnership with Caltrans to install access points in the sound walls along US Highway 101. And whereas Harold Chapman was a founding member of the Fire District's Disaster Operations Division that prioritized planning, preparedness, and enhanced response, Baylands Rescue Training Center that created a partnership with Pacific Gas and Electric that developed a training site for tens of thousands of fire and rescue personnel worldwide. South Bay Water Rescue Program of the Palo Alto Fire Department, resulting in the creation of the Fire District Water Rescue Program. The Fire District's Heavy Rescue and Rescue Systems training programs for student and instructor management that evolved into the Fire District becoming California Task Force 3. And whereas Harold Chapman ensured that tax dollars were managed responsibly, that resulted in securing a bond rating of AA+, paying down unfunded accrued liabilities, increasing the fire district's GAN limit, and improved the fire district's ISO rating to a Class 2 fire rating. And whereas Harold Chapman secured and supervised the contracts and construction of fire stations 2, 6, and 4, assisted in the completion of fire stations 3, 5, and 7, and acquired properties and structures in preparation of growth in the fire district. And whereas Harold Chapel secured enhanced service and partnership agreements with key federal and state agencies such as the Governor's Office of Emergency Services, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, the Stanford Linear Accelerator, the Department of Energy Laboratories, the United States Coast Guard, Caltrans, Pacific Gas and Electric. And whereas Harold Chapel-Hunman was instrumental in developing California state legislation SB 575 O'Connell, Green Oaks Family Academy Elementary School Fire Act of 2002 to ensure that automatic fire sprinkler systems and fire alarm systems are provided in school construction. And AB 254 Jeffries Emergency Vehicles Payment and Toll Suspension in 2010, which waives fees and penalties for emergency vehicles on toll bridges and roads. And whereas Harold Chapel-Hunman has been and continues to be the fire district's volunteer historian to preserve its history, leading to the restoration of Old Tom, which is used to promote and support the fire district's community event, and creation of the fire district's museum, probably known as the Chapel-Hunman Museum. And now therefore be it resolved that the Menlo Park Fire Protection District hereby expresses its gratitude to Harold for his contributions to the fire district and outstanding service to the community, and wish Harold continued success in all of his endeavors, and expresses our hope for his continued health, happiness, and prosperity. So this is on behalf of the fire district that we present to you. And thank you, Harold.
Are you into the sun, Dan? Is that gonna work?
Nope, you got it. 1, 2, 3. Got it.
Thank you. So does the board want to know? No, this is.
Wherever you want.
Why don't you?
Wallace, it's a matter of where you want me to go.
Robert?
Yeah, I just a few, personally, sometimes get lost in words. But all the accolades that Chief Harold, the activities that he has accomplished, is only a portion of who he is as a person. And I think as a person, when I first came on the fire district, came to volunteer to be on the board, and then got elected, it was Chief Harold that kind of kept me on the board, because I sort of resigned from the board the day after I got on the board. But he encouraged me to stay, and I'm glad he did, because I have begun to realize what value that I bring to the board. And for that, I'm eternally grateful, as well as being a friend as well over the years, because she had to kind of school me to the art of being a board member here in Menlo Park. And for that, I'm very grateful. So I would think that
You're a natural. Thank you, appreciate it.
I promise I'll be here.
You just got a meeting to run.
Well, you know, as myself wearing the uniform, you know, not only are you a legend, okay, but your legacy continues with all the new firefighters, staff members that are there. I mean, it's quite an accomplishment. And, you know, we had talked about this is your agency. I mean, you've gone through it, you start from the beginning, from basics all the way up to budget. And it's a great accomplishment. Appreciate it. Thank you, Teresa. Thank you.
It's all been said. People didn't let them, you know.
And,
You want to say
you
anything?
can say something, and keep it short.
I'm sure the chief will keep it short.
I'm seeing whether he can. I appreciate it, and let me tell you, 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago, when I left, I had the greatest last day of anybody, I think, when we got to open up, have promotional ceremony, people that were promoted, got to have their families be there, with no masks, and that was a highlight for me, that before I left, especially because there's 28 people that have sat up waiting for some level of acknowledgement or promotion, so I didn't know a better way to lead. You didn't need to do this. Thank you very much for doing it. I don't want to, make it sound like I don't appreciate it if people do. But, all the things that you said, there's always other people that stand behind you to help you get things done, let alone that they do the work. So, a lot of times the chiefs get acknowledged for the things that they do when other people really do that, or supporting to get that done. So, all the things I did in my career, I did either on the shoulders of other people or, hand in hand with the people I work with, or other people doing the work and, getting some level of acknowledgement, even though maybe sometimes it wasn't always completely me. It's Mark's agency now, it's not my agency. And, I'm well aware of that, and I wish him luck. I think he does a great job. He comes to retiree functions, does a good job of keeping retirees updated. We did do Mark Lovici's event together, and that was great. It allowed me to present to Mark, who was an integral part of our development as a state and federal team. And, last thing I can be saying, 2 years ago when I retired, there's so many things that go through your mind when you're retiring. I mean, you're still kind of in that work mode. But, the perspective 2 years later is I feel very grateful for having been here, for, 50 years of board, to be able to have been the fire chief. Even after getting injured, the ability to come back. A lot of people I hear have like post-traumatic issues of leaving the organization. I think that kind of helped prepare me, honestly, that I haven't really had any problems. That's not that I don't miss everybody. It's not that I don't miss, being able to get things done, but I think, when you think your career's over, at one point you're sitting in the hospital, you're not sure what your life's gonna be next. And be able to come back from that, I was given a gift then. Every day after that was kind of, icing on the cake. And so to be able to do this for 40 years was, was a real privilege, and I'm grateful for it. And if that's the way you remember me and how I lead, then that's great, because that's truly what's in my heart. So thank you all very much, and I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Remember, people in wheelchairs don't pass that. Oh, yeah. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Got it. Thank you. Thank you. All right, thank you.
Carol, congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you
all.
for your service.
Thank you.
Painful last year.
Our regular meeting. Public hearings. Item 3, public hearing for fiscal year 2023-24 district budget and full-time FTE staffing level. So I'll open up the public hearing for our budget. I can have word.
President Hagerl, just for the record, it's worth just noting that this public hearing was noticed in accordance with the health.
I don't think you have any people with comments. Okay. Then I'm going to close the public comments and close the public hearing. And we'll go to item 4, which is adopt by resolution fiscal year 2023-24 final budget and full-time staffing levels.
So move.
Your second? Any discussion? I'll open it up for director's discussion. Chuck?
I'm gonna vote against the budget. I haven't spent a lot of time reiterating what I said last month, but I think the budget is presented in a way that's misleading. This is an example. The budget on page 17 of our packet indicates that we're going to have our expenditures are being reduced by 8.3%. But in fact, expenditures and the reason, well, in fact, expenditures are actually going up about 6%. And the reason for the discrepancy is that the budget is being measured not against what we're actually spending this year, but what the budget was for last year. Put this into perspective. Our budget last year was $75 million. It was a faulty budget for a variety of reasons. 75 million this year, we're going to spend only 69 million, but what we spent this year was 65 million. So we're going from 65 million up to 69 million. And I think by calling this a reduction, it's simply not true. We're spending more money. And I just don't think we should be presenting things in this manner. It's just not, yeah, it's just misleading. And I just don't like putting it in this format. I think we've increased staffing so that we could, one of the rationales for increasing staffing was to reduce overtime. Our overtime now is budgeted of $8 million. And when you're looking at a $69 million budget, $8 million in overtime, I really think it's unquestionable. So I'm going to stop here because again, I've gone through this before. I understand that the budget will probably pass, but I don't think this is the way we should be presenting the budget. I think we've gone backwards this year compared to what progress we made in the last couple of years. And I'm very disappointed in how we're presenting ourselves financially. That's my comment.
Any other comments from Director Roberts?
One clarification, Alan, on page 14, we talk about the new development property tax assessment. And I noticed that there are two projects, and I assume money from the past three have been to support the University Circle project in Colorado and other projects. Could you help me out to understand how those particular projects got selected in seed funds, seed funds, and particular funds, and so what's that process for doing the funds?
So these are actually previous RDAs established by the city. So when they dissolved it, basically, so there were successor agencies, and these two, particularly these two projects, or what I call it, yeah, the RDAs established by the cities are the ones on the list. So I'm not entirely sure, if the process on, what selecting the project in itself, but this is, based on, what we actually received, like notices we received from, the county on what city it is and what specific project. So for the past few years, this has only been the projects that's involved, that we're getting taxes from. But down the road, I think once it's liquidated, once everything is, completed, this would eventually be transferred to our regular, secured or unsecured property taxes. But as far as just choosing, what project it is, that piece, we're not entirely sure how it's selected.
No more projects that beyond these two.
I'm assuming there's no more projects, but then again, if there are additional, projects that, we would have, like, we received it through notice from the county, and, the notice that we received from the county actually states, what city, what projects. So far, these are the only two. But definitely, if there are, future projects that's involved in this RDA, we would include that as well in the analysis.
So help me, so they are receiving the funds, I tell them how the money flows within, or did flow. It is from the property tax, I guess, the separate agency. And then after that resolved, these projects are books. And they continue to receive funds
Correct.
for a project.
Correct. Only the RDAs are dissolved, but there are development agencies who actually handle this project, like those successor agencies. So they still continue to receive funds, and that is transferred as well to the district.
So is there a due date to when receiving the funds?
I'm sorry.
Is there a due date to when they start receiving funds or when you receive it first?
So as far as I know, I haven't heard anything that would actually would actually stop the funding from this one, like, the revenue sources that we're receiving from this one. So as long as once it's completed, so basically, we're not gonna receive any funding from the RDAs anymore, but it would just regularly transfer to our regular secured property tax. So it's just a shift between those two revenue sources.
So one last thing, so at some point it will end, so it goes back into a journal. That fund, you will find then it should to spread out to the district and
Correct. So basically, once, the project is completed, once it's completed, again, so it's a complete dissolution now because the project is already completed. So now the taxes that they have been receiving now, since it's already completed, it's going to be like a regular, normal, assessments on those properties. And that property is going to, if it's like a secured property tax from, this our land or buildings, right? Then it's just gonna go to our, regular secured property tax. So right now it's as if it's split between the two because the project is still not completed, but once it's completed, it's just gonna shift into the regular secured property tax.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I sit on the oversight board that oversees these projects and so forth, so let's. Yes, what happened is originally the redevelopment agencies got money directly from property tax funds. And what happened is they simply diverted it, monies that used to come into the district or the schools, now went to the redevelopment projects. When they stopped that, they resolved the redevelopment agencies and they got what they call successor agencies who are in theory supposed to take care of these funds and be a trustee for these funds. And that's now the city of East Palo Alto for this particular agency. The projects essentially are completed. It's not that they're not done for the most part. There are a few, Oyster Point is not completed. There are very few that aren't completed. But these were the financings of the project. So for example, they took a 20 or 30-year bond. And those monies, the property tax monies, come in for those properties. Part of the money goes to pay off the loan on the project, and the rest gets distributed to the schools, fire districts, mosquito abatement, all those kinds of things. But the end date, roughly, almost all of them in San Mateo County will end by 2040. So that's really the end date for the last ones. Of the 13 agencies that were involved, one of them is already gone, so now there are only 12 left. And the rest of the money will be paid off really between about 2030 and 2040. And then we get all the money put back to the taxing agencies.
Which again, you just put it out to that's right, anybody else.
That's right. That's right. And there's no set percentage because every little taxing district that's part of that redevelopment agency has different percentages for the various things, the water agency, the schools, and community colleges, whatever. So, but we get a fairly hefty share of that.
There's a motion and a second in the comment. Not roll call, Michelle. Dr. Bernstein?
I'm sorry, are we voting on the motion to approve?
Yeah.
Okay.
Dr. Bloom?
Yay.
Dr. Jones? Dr. Swan?
Here.
So yeah, voting for it.
Yes.
Thank you. Dr. Lawler? Aye. So that motion carries.
I'd like to,
Take policies to close the doors.
Yeah, okay.
I'd like the minutes to reflect, please, summary of the rationale for. Thank you.
Great. We're on to the consent calendar. Is there a motion?
Hold on. Close the doors.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks. It's not. We got to close it.
Okay, on to the consent calendar. Is there, would anyone like to pull out any items? If not, is there a motion to go with the consent?
I'd like to go up to 7.
Okay. Any others? Is there a motion to approve items 5 and 6 on the consent calendar?
So,
There's a second?
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion or public comment on the consent calendar items 5 and 6? Okay, roll call please, Michelle. Director Hunter.
Aye.
Director Hunt.
Aye.
Director Jones.
Aye.
Director Solomon.
Aye.
Director Paul. Aye. So that motion carries. And then let's go to item 7, which is on the consent calendar, which Director Bernstein pulled off. Chuck, did you like to?
I have a question, I had 2 questions relating to this. If we were to get these trailers, mobile portable buildings back, where would we store them?
That's it. Right now, probably out in the active station 1, I'm just trying to think of where we have space. Ultimately, our hope is that when Santa Rosa is done and our stations are constructed, it might align with actually Station 1 project and us needing to relocate fire station staff into them, so the timing might be good, but right now we have some vacant space where we can. Okay, and where we have additional space, and there's not very much else. So, I mean, yeah, longer term, we're anticipating the use and need for them for us. If the board moves forward with a Station 1 project. Otherwise, I think at some point in time, we would just look at selling them. Their Chief Coyle went up and inspected them in Santa Rosa, and they're in better condition than they were when we gave them. It significantly improved them, so that's our hope, is that the timing wise, this works well with us, remodeling and redoing Station 1. And we'll be able to locate them somewhere on the back portion of the parcel to do that Station 1 project in phases.
The reason I brought it up is, and just then my second question is, are we specifying that they can't return them sooner than this end date? Because we don't have a place to put them.
I don't think we're saying that they can't return them sooner. I don't anticipate that, but, should that happen, we also did. I'm just trying to think about where, we have probably 3 different locations where we might be able to relocate them. Or away on whatever project. But if they finish their safety project sooner, I think they have the option.
Those, I just want to understand the situation, so I'll make a motion to approve depending on the timing.
Any comments? I'll take a public comment if anyone wishes to comment on this item. See you again, please, for the roll call, please. Director Bernstein.
Aye.
Director Jones.
Aye.
Director Solomon.
Aye.
Director Paul. Aye. That motion carries. We're on to item B, that the Item 8, which is to adopt by resolution the annual appropriation limit of $163,139,144 for fiscal year 2023. Elaine. Like to keep up this report.
Yep, so some sort of a refresher, so this GAN limit, so we call it the GAN initiative, is a result of Prop 30 in 1978 and Proposition number 4 in 1979. So that actually sets the limit for the growth of the government spending, basically the expenditure. So as a result, each government agency would really have like a set limit or a cap on the revenues that they need to appropriate in any given fiscal year. So that appropriation limit is basically the revenue sources is applied only on proceeds of taxes. And each year, the annual appropriation limit is adjusted. So on an annual basis, the California State Department of Finance actually gives us like a notice of, what the actual, per capita income and the population change for, the district or the county in each of the cities. So that's where we actually get the calculation. And they actually, set an example on the calculation page. Let's see. So on page 98, so that's really, the calculation setup that's provided by the state. So for fiscal year 23-24, based on the formula provided by the state, the district's appropriation limit is again 163.1 million, which is higher than our spending budget for our revenues, basically that's amounting to 72.8 million. So we are under the limit of about 90.4 million. So we are proposing to adopt, the annual appropriation limit of 163.1 million for fiscal year 2023.
Any other questions or comments by the directors? Any comments for this item? Any public comment? Okay, roll call, please, Ms. Sonic. That is a motion. Oh, I'm sorry.
I move that we accept the appropriation. I'll second.
Okay, there's a motion in the second. Director Bernstein? Director Jones? Director Sonic? Director Cronin? Aye. So that has been carried. Thank you. Item 9, discuss the district's capital replacement fund requirements. Chief.
Yes, this is mine. My apologies in advance for anyone that's trying to read the dash spreadsheet. It's best viewed in the 11x17 format. At least not conceptually about it. This is something I think the board has been asking for, as Director Bernstein said, for many years. Finally, we're debuting here at the board tonight. It's a work in progress. We're open to input, whether it be tonight or in the form of emails or feedback to the finance committee. But really the intent of creating this report and possibly including it in the treasurer's report annually is to identify what we anticipate to be our capital replacement needs looking out in the future and identify it as a dollar amount. So it's very similar to what homeowners associations do when they're trying to build up their reserves for whatever replacements they anticipate. We've done the same thing. It's a little bit different. Conceptually, it's similar to the depreciation statement, but it's different in that rather than using the actual purchase price of the existing asset, what we do in our plan doing on an annual basis is to estimate the replacement cost of all of our assets. In this case, just a little detail on it. We've gone through kind of an inventory of our district assets that we anticipate to have a replacement cost of over equal to or more than $200,000. The reason we did that is if we had it at 100,000, we end up including in there like a suburban, fully outfitted suburban. And those are things that kind of getting replaced more frequently as part of our operating budget. We don't need to have set aside in the capital reserves replacement fund. So in essence, what we've done is identified our major equipment that we have. It's most of our apparatus, it's all of our fixed facilities, our fire stations, our head building warehouse. You'll see there's a couple areas in there that are still a question mark. One of which is our use of our training site. We're just not sure what that's gonna be. We know that at some point in time, there's gonna be a need for some kind of cost associated with locating that. We don't know what that's gonna be. That's not necessary, but so really what it helps us do is a couple of things, is we build up significant reserves that helps us be able to identify why we're accumulating those reserves and what the purpose is. It will help explain that to our community. It will help explain that, the significant reserves that we have to our cities who don't pay us directly, but whose constituents through property taxes come into our financial statements. And we'll show them that we're being prudent in having these significant funds set aside currently in our city funds for future replacements. The one item, assuming my numbers are relatively accurate, if we were going to catch up and have a reserve balance that was adequate for our needs, based on our expectations of the cost of the future, the amount today would be about $162 million. I have a little note under there that amount would be reduced to $115 million, and the Station 1 project was reduced to $60 million. So those things will be decided. That it's going to fluctuate from year to year. It's going to fluctuate based on direction we get from the board on what we end up doing with Station 1. And then as part of the report, we also identify what, how well we're currently funded. And with our current balance that we have in CIP of approximately $38 million, we're currently at 24% funding. Based on the highest projections with our Station 1 replacement cost and all the other items that are on. And then in the final two columns, you'll see what we should be, assuming we could be fully funded, those additional amounts, but what we should set aside every year to maintain that fund. And obviously, I don't think we'll ever get to that point where we get fully funded. But what it does is it helps us into long-term planning with identifying what our needs are. And then it will also help us, like I said, explain to our constituents, whoever they may be, as to why we have to do this. So for that, again, the intention is not an incredibly formal budget. It's there are estimates, and it gives us an approximation of what we anticipate the earnings are. And I think what we'll probably do on an annual basis is include it in some kind of the credit reports. Share it. For that, open to any questions.
Any questions or comments? Chuck?
I have lots, but let's try to.
Anyone? I don't see anyone except for you right now.
Well, thank you, Chief. It has been a long time coming. I think this is, in one way, as simple as this presentation is, it's hugely important for our planning and so forth. So I really appreciate it. I have a couple of questions about even what you were talking about Station 1. I'm just curious about the thinking. Right now, you've got the replacement cost at 107 million. And you say, well, maybe that would only be 60 million. But I don't understand why it wouldn't be the same as Station 6, Station 4.
Sure, that's a great question. It depends on the scope of what the project is at Station 1. It's potentially not just a replacement of the station. It may be the building of some training facilities behind it and some auxiliary buildings, some classrooms, et cetera. So
That's what I was trying to ascertain. So it could be the tower, it could be any.
sure, and it could be, it depends on what the ultimately is. Or it could potentially be just a fire station, or it could be the everything that includes. I think $107 million would include completely relocating everything down there that's currently at 170 and continue to have funds. Administrative staff, that's the higher. And so that's part of the discussion that there was facilities staff, maybe just
starting to work on scope of what that might be. So what I took really was current estimates that we had based on some project designs that were done a number, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and we had current costs. So, yeah, my guess is ultimately when we are all done, the numbers are probably going to be low.
The other thing I was gonna ask you, right now, for the most part, it assumes 50-year lives for buildings and so forth.
Right.
What's the thinking that they're gonna last 75 years?
And part of it is construction. They're constructing more like commercial buildings, and you look at some of our older stations were more like residential structure, just. Yeah, so that's really our hope is that for the way we construct these, they may last 75 years. Again, that's what our hope is today. We have no idea whether in 30 years who knows, maybe firefighters are replaced by AI and we don't even have fire stations. Right, so, who knows? But, I mean, that's our current, thing. We're trying to build and construct fire stations now so they last at least 75 years. And that's gonna require upgrades and maintenance as we go along, the systems change, the structure.
So the finance committee provided quite a bit of interaction around development of this. And I think to your point, Chuck, about 50 years versus 75 years, there's lots of assumptions in this entire document because the chief had to make assumptions about inflation costs on engines, inflation costs on construction. So if you actually kind of added up all the layers of judgment that are in here, and the view of the finance committee, sort of my view on it was, this is directionally really valuable to us. Because from my perspective, relatively short duration on the board is our capital improvement fund that we show in the budget, I think is grossly understated. And what this is starting to do is bring visibility to the fact that says that's grossly understated. And the idea that says, we have all these tax dollars coming in and we're a rich district and we're used a number of times. It's like, well, yes and no, but if you're not considering the actual cost of capital needs over the course of time, all of those, kind of ideas and judgments about the financial health of the district, they're all relatively invalid. If you actually believe there's $115 to $160 million worth of capital needs that are not reflected in our budgets. And so this is, to me, a really important document to start helping us think directionally about budgeting for capital, but also to think about how we're going to ultimately fund these kind of capital needs, some of which are very long lead time activities like bond, issuing bonds and other things. And if you have a long range view of what your capital needs are, you also create the opportunity to be opportunistic in the bond market. We just we didn't issue any bonds in the last few years. We missed, one of the lowest cost bond markets that's, probably will exist in my lifetime, I suspect. But it is cyclical. So in as much as there's another cycle down the road, if we have some idea of what our capital needs are, it will improve our ability to do financial forecasting to actually understand the real needs of the district. But as it sits right now, in a way, our budgets are grossly understated because they're not considering the capital costs that we've approved, and they're certainly not considering the chief's estimate on the catch-up costs just to bring us current on our capital needs.
Yeah, and I think that would be today, in the ad hoc committee, where we began to look at the process of our development cost as related to, the station line and the other station and the building we develop. And this is the beginning process, kind of fine tuning, look at those numbers and then fine tune dig into the actual cost, budget cost for the project. And so this number may be understated and maybe overstated. So, but I think as we work the process, as we begin to look at each line item, so
I couldn't agree more. That's, and asking really to try to see, right now, we're quoting these numbers. I think we need to be careful about these numbers getting into the press or whatever. Until we know more. That was the first step. Very under. The one thing I did want to ask about, though, again, it's not to be in any way critical, but I think it is conceptually a flaw. And that is that the building costs are kind of a constant $1,600 per square foot, regardless of when we expect that building to be replaced. And that doesn't make sense. For example, station 4. We're talking about 75 years from now, it's not going to be $1,600.
What we try to do is approximate it in today's numbers. Like if we had to replace it today, what would it cost us today to replace this facility? And that's what we have here. Now, our intention isn't to replace it today, it's to replace it over and amortize it over 75 years. What you'll see is that each and every year is our, next year when we come back to the board and share with you our updated schedule, we'll see what construction costs are. My guess is they're going to escalate. It might be $1,700 a foot, and we'll adjust that. So the amortization isn't going to be exactly the same every year. It's going to keep adjusting. I don't have a better way of doing it. I'm not trying to project, in 75 years, the replacement cost for Station 4 could be $250 million in 75 years in the future dollars. So I'm trying to articulate it in today's current dollars. I don't know a better way to do it, but I think it's probably pretty an accurate way. That makes sense.
Well, if we're going to fund it each year, I know what you mean. You denominate current dollars or, according to the time value of money. And I think we will, at some point, we should get to time value, because otherwise we'll get 75 years from now, we'll have enough to replace it today, but not enough to replace it in 75 years.
The hope is in, say, in 30 years, when we're doing this, our predecessor and successor are doing this, they'll be formulating the cost of the PlayStation 4 at $5,000 a square foot. And the number that we'll need to set aside is going to grow incrementally as we get closer to that date. Kind of thing. And it's just going to over time increase. And so, I'm not smart enough with Excel to figure out how to do that, but I think it's a pretty good snapshot. And let's say we have to replace everything that we own. We know what our replacement cost would be today. Yeah, I said the earthquake happened and everything bubbled.
No,
That's the number.
this is a heroic.
Yeah, some things are more active for a state than others. If one of our fire trucks is totaled by a Tesla on the highway, which is becoming a frequent event, we kind of know what a fire is at current time. So I think this will always, from my plans, will always be a working document. But I think directionally this should help us around capital planning in a really important way.
And I think that also, looking at it from a much broader perspective than for a whole, for our governance process, you kind of on a regular basis have numbers like this, so we can begin to share our thoughts about, how much of the readjusting our plans, I think on a consistent basis might be important. Rather than waiting 5 minutes and come back, what do we do now? This is kind of, we have blindsided. I think every year we have some idea, and I think we can forecast a little bit there during the direction.
We can capitalize this. I'm not sure what our auditor would say, but capitalize this, so we have on our books reserved for a liability for these future costs. And so that we're not showing, fat reserves, because in fact, we have a shortage of reserves. Maybe these things are.
That would be an interesting question to pose to the auditors. I could not find another local government agency that was doing something like this. You'll find most cities have a 5-year CIP plan, and that's about the limit. And, you know, how, if it could even be reflected in our financial statements, I don't know if we can or however, but it's a good start reflecting in a staff report and it's a note in the treasury.
Well, I think one of the reasons you don't see it is their plan is not to fund it with current funds. Their plan is to use debt at some point to fund it. Use bonds or something of that sort. I think except for kind of a mistake you made, in my opinion, about 10 or 12 years ago, the Buy America bonds, whatever they were. The district is trying to finance internally its capital items. I support that. So,
Thank you.
Any other comments? Thank you, Chief, and the finance committee. Thank you. We'll move on to item 10, which is to adopt a resolution authorizing rightfully and probably make no comment for item here of the capital requirements. Okay, now we move on to item 10. Adopt a resolution authorizing the payment of $3,082,200 toward the district's first safety classic funded approved liability. Elaine.
So again, a little background, some historical, background about this. So since 2009, if you're all aware, the district started setting aside funds to manage our UAL, our funded approved liability, due to the huge losses that was incurred by CalPERS in 2008. That's about like 25% losses. So since 2009, we actually started, setting aside funds to have like pay out or pay down our UAL just to kind of like up, or increase, our funding status at the same time, manage, our plans, basically, or our assets in the safety classic plan specifically for this one. So we are actually recommending to pay down our UAL for our safety classic plan for an amount of almost 3.1 million for a few reasons. Number one, we are going to save approximately 667,000 amortization interest over the course of the amortization period. So this is almost as if it's also already like a set or a fixed amount, not a fixed, but a certain amount that we will save versus actually investing this $3.1 million into like fixed. Because right now, yes, the interest rates are high. It's if we expect to say 5% return on our fixed income securities, it's not certain. Like future returns are not certain. It's basically past or historical performance does not really predict what the future performance is. And with the current interest rate environment, yes, it is very advantageous, but at the same time, in the long run, I mean, maybe in 2 years, yes, it would still be like 5, 6, or 4%. But down the road, it will gradually go down to what it's not going to go down to zero, but it's going to go down gradually. So the interest rate or the investment returns that we're going to earn if we invested this specific funds, if we let PFM or newly hired funds, it's uncertain. So it's we're not going to be able to predict how much of our savings or how much of our returns would be in the future if we invest in different funds. Second, on top of the savings of the 607,000 savings, it's almost as if we pay this down, it will be part of the plan's assets. So we're still going to earn investment returns on this, but it's just going to be handled by CalPERS. Right now, what their discount rate is or what they're expecting to actually earn for the next fiscal year, at least is 6.8%, and that's because they have a more aggressive asset allocation than what is allowed for us to actually manage internally. So that's if that happens, for sure, I mean it's 6.8%, right? But of course, the actual returns will be probably bigger. And then the third one is in anticipation of the additional UAA that we will incur in the next valuation period. So CalPERS right now is actually anticipating a negative 7.5% loss on, the portfolio, their portfolio. So in dollars, we are actually estimating like around 35.4 million additional UAL that we need to pay over 20 years for our UAL. So that would actually largely reduce our funded status from 92.2% right now to 83.7%. So we are recommending to pay down $3.1 million for safety plastic UAL for this size.
And I'm Director of Budget, share some additional information. This is one of these things where a year ago, we paused on putting this way. I really had a lot of questions about our return on investment. It felt like we were going into a black hole, and we figured that out. God bless Francine and Elaine, they got deep into it with an actuary that worked for CalPERS and actually got us some answers. And what I discovered was, well, first of all, the amount that we're talking about today, when we come to budget, we budget 41% for our employer contribution. And we take the difference between what we budget and what our actual number is, and that delta is the amount that we have historically contributed to pay down our unfunded liability. To put it in the simplest terms, after listening to Francine and Elaine talk about it quite what I've explained to you is that this unfunded liability that is ours that we own, CalPERS charges us 6.8% on it every year, right? So in those simplest terms, when you pay in $3 million, you're earning 6.8% on it. Just like if you pay down your mortgage that is currently at a 6.8% mortgage rate. So that's why we're, at least why I'm, they went through all these things and these complex spreadsheets, and then we brought it to the finance committee and brought those explanations to makes sense, and I'm comfortable with. Just for full transparency, initially, I was under the impression that it reduced our employer contribution. It does not. And that was my first concern, is we had, over the course of the last 10 years, contributed $59 million to pay down our UAL. And our employer contribution rates didn't seem to be affected by it. And that caused the conversation, and now I understand that's not part of it. It does affect interest. Basically. Yeah, so.
Significant.
Anyway. So that's my comment.
Yes, the only thing when the finance committee discussed it. Yeah, we kind of agreed on giving the 6.8% fee that they charge. We're not going to get that on even today's healthy interest rates. So from a short-term perspective, it makes sense. From a longer-term perspective, we talked about the potential idea of us creating kind of, for lack of a better term, side-by-side fund. But where we have discretionary payments, and these are discretionary payments, we don't have to on an annual basis pay money in against our unfunded liability. We can do what a lot of cities and organizations do, just let that accrue. But we also have the alternative of saying, well, rather than give it to CalPERS and have CalPERS invested and lose our money on an ongoing basis, we do have the alternative of saying, well, we're going to take in the future a similar $3 million and say, well, we'll put this in our unfunded liability fund that our investment managers manage for principal protection instead of, in some cases, higher risk investment strategies. Because essentially what's happening is, the district over the course of time has been pouring money in to offset our unfunded liability. And it's not even keeping up with the investment losses of CalPERS. So in as much as we have discretion over this part of the payment, it may make sense in the future for us to manage our own funds for the unfunded liability, of which at any point in time in the future, we can turn around and say, here you go, CalPERS, here's all that money, and drop down our balance accordingly. But essentially would give us more control over the discretionary money we've been putting in every year. And so that was an idea that surfaced during the meeting. Obviously, a litany of questions and work that needs to occur to be able to actually do that. But structurally, it's possible and something that over the course, hopefully before we get to the same decision point a year from now, the decision won't be just, how much we want to pay down, but whether we want to pay it down directly to CalPERS or whether we want to pay it into our self-managed fund, where we can manage to protect principal instead of managing an investment strategy that seemingly on an ongoing basis does not preserve principal.
We created. And then in the long run.
That's right. Yeah, and then folks, for just for the unfunded liability, and then what it does is it's discretionary, or we don't have to pay. CalPERS is calling us saying you have to give me this money. It costs us money and we don't. That's what we're doing. It's discretionary. And so essentially what this other fund would do is allow us to have that money collecting, but not taking the investment risk that seems to be pretty common in CalPERS. To me, a retirement fund should be investing for principal protection. And that doesn't seem to be the case with CalPERS, given the size of the losses that we take and the fact that our unfunded liability is going to increase dramatically here this next year.
CalPERS can't move the money fast enough. If they see something that's actually losing fast, they can't move that money, right?
Well, they can't, but they have so much.
Fast as good.
Well, so I think it's a different investment strategy, right?
Yes.
Our side fund have a different investment strategy that would protect or preserve our principal versus being an epidemic of CalPERS investments. And the market wins because they're so big that I'm not even sure there's enough inventory and securities in capital markets for them to take their money. Right, they're buying or selling a single security can actually move the market. For better or worse, so as Gary said, for this side fund with a different and probably more conservative investment strategy, which is usually used for retirement funds, right? The primary objective would be principal preservation for retirement money. That's the investment, the loss would be for this side.
Yeah, right now, we just keep pouring more money in and have an investment losses consumed $100.
Right, so right now, it's just.
Yeah, and so it's kind of one of these, it's like, well, okay, well, are there alternatives out there? One alternative is you can't change the amount we consider change point, the amount we ask to contribute legally every year out of corresponding payroll and everything. But we are making a discretionary decision to take budget and make this contribution. We don't have to do this contribution. And a lot of cities and a lot of organizations don't do catch-up contributions at all. But in as much as we're doing catch-up contributions, for me, it's kind of a painful concept that says we're voluntarily putting catch-up money in there, and then they're turning around and investing in a risky way. Just keep growing. Yeah, we contributed, but it's gonna get bigger again.
Oh, so I just wanted.
We don't have this year's investment losses yet.
Right,
And we won't get it for 18 months, I think you said.
No, the latest, the latest one that we're gonna get is probably gonna be released or issued in August. So we're probably gonna know, the actual amount of the UL that's gonna get added to the safety classic plan by probably September. So,
well, so this will confirm since over the last 13 to 14 years, if we include this 3.1, we will continue with 64 million total, is that correct?
correct, that's correct.
That's a lot of money. I mean, I'm glad we've done it, but I think that the finance committee and chief have brought up some really good points about that this side-to-side funding, because the investment camps be completely different and something that we can control.
Yeah, I think my point on it is, I think it's terrific for the district on a regular basis, paying down on, the unfunded liability. Like I said, a lot of organizations haven't been doing that, so we're in a better position than most organizations, which is great. All I'm looking at is from a practical perspective, is there a way for us to preserve more of that investment? Versus a lot of that money that we have invested over the years is lost to investment losses.
At least mitigate the risk. Right?
We can do some, it's an alternative risk strategy.
Exactly.
I mean, in some years, in a good year, we can miss out on upside. I mean, it goes both ways, but generally, most individuals and most people, financial planners that are planning this retirement funds are planning retirement funds, principal protection, not high risk investments. Whereas CalPERS is invested in venture funds, private equity and other things. And for a lot of reasons that Virginia mentioned is they have so much capital they have to invest. There's a limited pool of investments they can put that money into. So they can't just buy treasuries. There's not enough treasury bonds out there. It's a problem that they have so much money to manage, but on a smaller scale, we don't have that same talent. So we have a lot more options available to stay out of that, potentially. So I wanted to just surface the concept, and obviously, it'll probably take the finance committee working with staff and legal services probably a full year till we're up to this decision point again, to have vetted that idea, set it up, see if it's possible, set it up. Board can get updated on the additional frequency. In the meantime, I would move that we approve this payment as outlined, because it makes infinite sense given the 6.8%.
Did you want to make that motion? Is there a second? Any other discussion? John?
I want to ask you. Because I want to make sure about what we're paying now and so forth. There's a point where we have to pay our current CalPERS payment, and we pay a current portion of the liability. When do we pay that?
Yeah, so basically there's the employer contribution rate is composed of two things. One is actually the normal employer contribution rate that gets it up every payroll, right? So that's like every pay period. The other one it's the UAL, it's the annual or mandated required UAL payment that we need to do. So that's usually we usually pay it, we prepay it in July. Because we actually say we have enough money and then we can save interest on that. Right now, I think we can save 3.4 interest if we pay it in July, our annual mandated or required UAL payment. We can save like 3.4% interest on that, but we can spread it out for 12 months. So that's the two composition components of
So we should focus on that for a second. We don't have discretion on that. We have to pay it.
Correct.
And we only have two choices. We either pay it in installments every month, or we prepay it and we save the interest costs.
Correct. That's
okay. I just want to be sure that that payment, which I guess we would make next month, is not what we're talking about here.
no, it's different. Yeah.
Okay, this is the difference between the 41% recharge and the actual cost.
That's
Okay, and it turned out to be this 3 million, whatever.
correct.
Okay, I'm sorry, I just wanted to be sure of which payment we were talking about. So you'll be back in a month, I assume, to tell us to prepay that next payment.
Yeah, I think I'm not sure if we actually are going to the board to actually pay it because it's a required payment anyway. So I think in the past we usually just prepay it because again we're saving interest and we have funds for it. So I think next month I'm gonna check, but we may not go to the board for that because again it's a required payment.
Well, I'm not suggesting you can come to the board, but it has been before. That's how I learned about it. When there was a staff report that explained it. Okay, I knew it was about this time of year. I thought maybe we were talking about the required payment here.
So this 3.1 million, CalPERS call it as ADP, so additional discretionary payment. So it's on top of the required annual UAL payment that we do every July. Yeah, and then just to answer Director Silang's question earlier, yes, CalPERS actually doesn't move as fast in comparison to us, because basically what they do is they have a certain asset allocation, let's say hedge funds, private equity, stocks, bonds, fixed income, private debt, all of that. And that asset allocation, a certain percentage, it needs to go to the board for approval. So that kind of like delays the process. So, and you're correct, Rachel. So they don't move as fast. So they really don't act on, what the current, economy or environment right now because of that. So that's part of the delay. Yes.
Even out of their own mouths. When they went for the California special districts, California gave a report, and out of their own new CEO at that time, so that they don't confess them. Their own, their own state.
Yep, and I think partly the reason why they actually, I work with the city of San Jose's retirement services as well, so we have our own retirement services. They have like similar asset allocation, they have like very aggressive, type of securities, just because, as everyone knows, higher risk, higher returns, right? They need to catch up. Eventually, if they actually don't put, their funds in a more risky or a riskier investments, they wouldn't be able to fund, all of the costs like down the road. That's partly the reason why, it's vastly different from what we're allowed, because we're only allowed to like principal. So we're just really investing in fixed income security. We cannot invest in stocks, private debt, private equity, which are like, those alternative investments that they. So, but then again, it's just like a matter, like a different perspective in a way, because again, at the end of the day, if they don't do that, then they would end up, basically all agencies would end up with what, less than 50%, funded, status for the plans.
So one more question on that, I don't want to belabor the issue, but over the course of the next year, we're going to look with the finance committee on this. The payment that you were talking about, Director Bernstein, that's our mandatory payment. That payment, had we not contributed $62 million, would be significantly higher. That's right. The thing for us is to figure out what's the calculus. Where does it pay that? What would that payment be? Does it make better sense for us to independently invest it in a separate fund? We're going to work on that next year.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, so, I'll take public comment, because we need public comment on item 10. We have no public comment, so roll call please. I heard Director make a motion back, and I don't seconded it. And Director Bernstein.
Aye.
Director Glenn. Aye. Director Johnson.
Aye.
Director Swan.
Aye.
Director Crawley. Aye. That motion carries. So moving on to item 11, which is to approve the resolution authorizing the fire chief to execute the first amendment. Agreement between the National Guard Fire Protection District and Priceburg Law Firm. Francine or
We're very over Francine, there's questions, but really this one is totally simple. Obviously, as well know, we've been engaged in the services of Eddie a lot lately with all the negotiations that are going on. We've bumped up against this contract limit, so we're asking for the board to approve a resolution increasing his limit by $150,000. That's it. I don't. With that, I'll see if there's any questions. Anyway, we'd love to entertain them.
Okay, is there a motion to approve this resolution?
I'll second.
Any comments?
I have a question. I support this. I think it's doing a great job. But I don't believe this contract has come to the board before. I wonder why that was.
Believe it did not, it was because it was within the fire chief's limits.
Okay,
Well,
that's what I was guessing.
Yeah.
his, when he was at the other firm, that contract did come, and then when we parted ways, when he was within the fire.
Yeah,
fire
actually, that's that
chief.
reason, because it was
Yeah.
100,000 events, but now that it's exceeds that.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
So there's a motion in a second. Public comment? Okay, no public comment, any other corrective comments or questions? No, roll call please. Director Bernstein?
Aye.
Jones.
Aye.
Director Spano.
Aye.
Director Paul. Aye. So that motion carries. So item 12, adopt a resolution authorizing the fire chief to execute an agreement with the State Department of Forestry and Fire Protection and Cal Fire to participate in the Department of Defense firefighter property program. Chief.
This might also be. We have Chief Wordinger here, if there's any questions. We have access through Cal Fire's sponsorship that access the federal access equipment program. This is something I experienced in my last organization. We previously had access to it. What this allows us to do is through Cal Fire's sponsorship, be able to screen equipment that the federal government determines it no longer needs. And we can get it, basically the cost or just whatever their implementation costs. So in my conversations with the chief, our scope of what we're going to screen in is going to be very limited to what we already have. I certainly have been down the road before where I've had screens that have screened everything in, and we end up with even less space. Yeah, so it's not to just go out and get a million different things to put cool. We've identified, I think, 4 items that specifically we're looking for. Knuckle boom, crane, forklift, and possibly replacements for federal trucks. I don't know what the quality, but we will screen in just high quality equipment. I have an understanding already with Chief Wordinger that if it goes beyond anything like that, it's going to be, he's going to have oversight. I'm going to have oversight. I don't think we'll go off the rails, but it's a nice cost saving measure for us. We're hoping to be able to acquire some. So good.
And Director Paul.
What color is it?
Yeah. Yeah, well, they can do just about anything that oftentimes they're, green, 3%. We do have a requirement that we remove whatever logos are there. They haven't passed, there could be some costs associated with paint. So they don't need to do. Yeah, my last organization was just a slap or sticker on over it and try to grab the green.
Yes, I didn't understand something in the discussion on page 104 of our packet. John's here. What it says, this is the second paragraph of the discussion. It says, due to the uncertainty of the training facility, there are concerns with purchasing equipment that would primarily be used at the site. Participating in the FFP program will potentially address these concerns. I don't see how it addresses the concerns of the uncertainty of the site.
Well, yeah, my interpretation of that is that we're cautious in spending money on a site or investing additional monies on a site is a question right now. So by potentially acquiring equipment that has a little bit of cost, that it would be more prudent. But yeah, I understand the concerns. There's not really that direct correlation there.
It seems like if we get it for free, we should always get it for free. Regardless.
That is a true statement.
Okay.
Regardless, you have to jump back.
Okay. And then my other question is, there's no crane out there, it's no good. What do we do with that stuff? What do we do with it?
So one of the reasons why people run into this, how they mean to do this, because a large percentage of my time at the warehouse is surplusing all the equipment that we have in the fire district. It all seems to land at the warehouse for us to get rid of. And I believe the general intention is we want to retain some level of crane service at the rescue site. And we would rather not maybe repair a crane that's at the age that it is. So if we were to get another crane, you would put the current crane under, we've been utilizing gov deals at work. It's like eBay for government entities to sell equipment. And that's what we would do with the current crane if we were able to get a new crane.
Oh, I thought you were just gonna throw it away. I just wondered, where do you throw away an old crane?
No, there's a significant, it's policy 1111, and that's something that you directed Chief Chapel and Chief Stevens, a great director, probably early on in your time on the board of directors. So we follow that policy.
So you're saying that still has economic value, opposed to drink?
Oh, yeah, there's stations.
Oh, I thought it was a piece of junk. I didn't want to go and do it. These big, huge meters that
I believe it's, some of the, we have a training operators on the platform, so we need a component of repairing it because, the older cranes don't have circuit boards, they're all hydraulic and they're easier to maintain, but at the same time, it's extremely old piece of equipment. And it's very likely that once we repair that, come up with another repair shortly thereafter.
I think we are having a.
They came back to
Yeah.
the circuit there with power and 50 devices there.
So it's spooky.
No, it's prevention questions.
We gotta be your mind.
Director from our meeting. We can continue the meeting.
It's good.
So we could be 9 minutes. Getting a lot of that outside. Director Bernstein?
Hold on, can I ask the question, do we have to do a roll call vote when we're meeting in person?
He would say yes.
So
Because it's
it's
still-
actually not that easy a question to answer. So the short answer is yes, but like a fuller explanation. Let's go with the short answer.
Yeah. Roll call, please. Director Bernstein?
Aye.
Director Flynn?
Aye.
Director Jones?
Aye.
Director Sloan?
Aye.
Director Crowley? Aye. So that motion carried. So moving on to item 13, which is going to be pulled this month for the chief's request. We'll bring it back next month, right?
Yes.
Chief Lorenzen? Okay, so then we'll move on to poll, yes, we'll bring it back next month. Item 14, discuss the status of the county's proposal to increase dispatching service fees. So Chief Lorenzen, I asked him to prepare this report based on Director Bernstein's notes. We had an ad hoc committee meeting. I don't know, you want to kick this off, Chuck, or we can talk about it together, but I think Chief Lorenzen might actually have some others.
I can give you the latest information I have, though it has nothing, I mean, the county, obviously, Mike Kelly has been reaching out and asking to make up the difference for what he considers a subsidy to all fire and EMS agencies and law enforcement agencies that the county's dispatching for. We had a group of city managers and affected fire chiefs that were part of the conversation. The conversation continued, I believe, with a small group of city managers and possibly some electeds. And I think right now, the response back to Mike was, everybody's already prepared their budgets. We're not interested in the conversation right now. So I think it's kind of paused. I think, again, this is all coming in secondhand. Mike's response was, okay, maybe we can make up the difference over the course of 2 years. He's been proposing 3 years to increment everything. So it feels like, to a degree, the can has been kicked down the road until 8 or 10 months from now, but it's not. That's the current status. My understanding.
So I asked that this be placed on the agenda instead of having it as a committee report, because I think the issue is important enough. And I wanted the public to know that, you know, we're keeping an eye on it. So I want to thank the chief for keeping an eye on this and going to the meetings. And I don't know, Ron, if you've had anything, I mean, this, if the JPA has discussed any of this. I mean, you guys.
Well, I think the biggest problem is with the CAD and the Versatile software program between our tablet that we use for legislation, the fire agents, Visitor, which is just the CAD software program. They're not going, they don't have the same type of platforms. I would not vote to give the county anyone unless they could come up with a solution with a different way of either combining the software program, picking one or the other software program. It appears that the capital program is more helpful for us as a fire district than the Visitor, which is used basically at the time of that's all the domain, okay. That's what I mean.
Chuck,
You're gonna have to sell them.
do you want to talk about your notes? Do you have any comments about?
Yeah, I'll just say, I think there's lots of problems with this. It's not just the dispatch contract, it's the whole ambulance contract. And I think one of the problems is the ambulance contract rips off the residents, charges fees that insurance companies don't want to reimburse, which is high. We get no information from AMR, utilization, their costs. I believe it's a corrupt contract, and effectively AMR is giving kickbacks to the county, and the county gives part of the kickbacks to us. And it's pennies. We get a few dollars, a couple $100,000 a year. We have enormous costs associated with that. I'm not in favor of performance. Terrible, the last time we looked at it, it's taking them twice as long to dispatch as it's allowed. The flow of dispatch information is weird. It goes first to a police department, they say, oh no, this is fire. So it either comes back to the county, or somehow the police agency calls us. There's no measures on that, we don't have times, it's not recorded, so we don't know how well we're doing, how we're responding. For a long time, the AMR was being able to hire paramedics, so we were supplying paramedics in some cases. That didn't stop us from charging their clients for paramedic services that we provided. And then you can give us any of that money or anything. The whole thing is just terrible. And whatever we can do to either reform it or get out of it, I think we should move towards. So I don't think we should wait 10 or 11 months. I think we should look for other options. Philosophically, also, one of the things that really troubles is I think our district cares about the quality of service. But in some cases, we're being dispatched, quite a few cases, when we last had measures of this, we're being dispatched to other communities. And they're using our resources and the quality training that we're getting and the quality equipment we have. And then occasionally they'll send someone in us where there is perhaps less training or less good equipment, lower and so forth. I think we need to control the quality of the service we offer within our boundaries. Police departments, the police are all dispatched within their boundary areas. I don't see any reason why we shouldn't be dispatched to our boundary areas also. And one of the things from somebody who lived in the south end of the county, I don't know if it was this contract, but it was the county chief who at one point opposed us having a mutual aid agreement or an automatic aid agreement with Palo Alto. Well, I live 2 blocks from Palo Alto. I want Palo Alto to be able to help us out of Southern Front. And the county, so maybe they don't want resources going to Palo Alto, but too bad, we need them coming to us. And I'm willing to have our resources go to them for that exchange. So for a whole bunch of reasons, I think this is, the whole thing is bad. And I think we need to somehow get out of it. What do you think?
Yeah. Chuck makes some really great points, and I think the main thing that really troubles me the most is the 7-minute response. And the majority of these, they don't make that 7-minute response. We do as a fire agency, but the ambulance services do not. We're getting, well, that's what I'm just saying. Fire agencies are making that call of service around that 7-minute or under 7 minutes. And sometimes it takes quite a while for a transport to come. And you know, transportation to an emergency facility like emergency, very important. I don't know what the longest time, maybe the chief could tell us, the longest time that we have for the ambulance transport. Has there been long waits?
There can be, depending on, especially if the multiple calls on it, it's interesting. Our requirement is that we meet 90% of our, and that calls within 6 minutes, 59 seconds. Ambulance requirement is that they meet 90% within 12 minutes. So that is in theory what they are paying us through. They give to the ambulance JPA $5 million a year. Part of it goes to pay for the dispatch, part of it goes to pay for the JPA admin, part of it comes back to the fire districts for the payments for equipment. They'll purchase, but it all, most of this has been very little to do with the dispatch. It has to do with negotiation and that's contract. And that's going to be up for discussions and negotiations with counties. Probably 4 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then, the aspect when when we attended that meeting in EPA with the PG, power, the power issues, the power was off for 2 days. And PG has a program where they identify people that have physical needs where, they need either continual electricity or they need generators and they need some sustained oxygen and things like that. And the only thing the county has to do is pay an agreement through PG&E to release that information, put it in their passes. So they can identify those people. And Chief knows, because I've been CCing him on some of the dealings that I've been having with county dispatch, county communications, to try to set it up and where at least they can input it into the CAD in the remarks section, saying this is an individual that has an oxygen problem, type 1 diabetic, heart condition. I mean, that should be easy to put into the system. I mean, it's a data entry thing, right? We have it.
I mean, it makes a lot of sense to see they have it readily available to organizations that have that work with seniors, that work with individuals, so that in most cities, so when a disaster happens,
Right.
they have different reasons, readily available for those people to go out and knock on doors to try to understand where the teams are and how they're doing, et cetera. But if they keep it to themselves and they don't provide it, it's kind of a waste of good data.
Right, they should have a frequency database, and I'm sure every fire station here knows who the individuals are that they will always go to all the time for health issues. Like, African healthcare, some of these assisted living places. The different stations know where those areas are and the frequency of those calls. I mean, they should be inputted and put into the CAD system, but they're not.
Well, getting back to the dispatch, right, in terms of, the cost. I think that the county is looking for the cities and the fire districts to contribute more. Because the county thinks that it's had overpaid their percentage, and so that's why this is here. Actually, Chief, I just want to remind you that the chief and I actually had a meeting with the county manager, the county executive, like talking about this. And we thought that Measure K money would go towards this type of,
They can't even solve the original software program. How can we throw more money at a problem where they haven't even began to even, solve the software program?
well, so the point is that, if they're gonna look at potential contributions in a 2-year time frame instead of a 3-year time frame, because most of the cities in now have set our budget, then this issue is not going to go away. And we've been told that Measure K money is non-existent, there's no Measure K money to even fund this, even though Measure K was tasked primarily for public safety. And so I think the main thing that we're keeping an eye on during this process, what Chuck brought up about looking down south to Palo Alto, I mean, I don't think it's unreasonable, especially since according to the chief, North County Fire Authority was able to go, which includes Daly City, Colma, and Pacifica, was able to go into San Francisco. So it's a little, in my mind, a little hypocritical that we were not allowed to have really a joint agreement with Palo Alto when they're close. They actually go through, East Palo Alto to where we're named for our vehicle. It just makes no sense. So as we keep an eye on what's happening, the evolution of what's going to happen over the next 2 years, I think that we just have to keep an eye on the safety of our residents and the ability to have resources available.
They built a huge building, spent a lot of money in that building.
That was my opinion.
And it's, you might as well build a garage here. It's not a workable entity for fire.
Yeah.
Or for your service.
Well, the main thing that we'll just keep an eye on,
Thinking you can buy it. And I took your job.
It's don't think there's no evidence to contribute to this, that this.
And you just. Talking about.
Yeah. No, this is just, okay, so, no, there are no, any public comments on the issue of dispatch? Okay,
One quick comment right here, and it's to everybody's point there about automatic data, we might figure it out with Palo Alto. It's not acceptable. We're working with Palo Alto regulators and trying to figure out how we get around some of the technical complications or our different frequencies, there's different dispatch centers. And we're a small little, boat in the public safety communications center, so we're trying to figure out what it is, but your partner, spouse, or whatever, is not breathing right there, and Palo Alto's right next door to you. It's just, we need to make that better, so
yeah,
just know staff is working, and we and Palo Alto both are very interested in forming automatic agreements. And there's no issues for the county fire chiefs. There have been rumors that they're headed their ass. They don't exist.
so is Woodside Fire also looking at
Yes.
that work
They are.
with lost function? So is this something that we should be working with Woodside Fire on as well, or is it just?
We're working, we're partnering with Second Fire.
On
Audit. They're all. Everybody should want.
Yeah. Yeah.
Bring somebody.
So, Ron,
You have enough authority
Yes.
to move forward.
Yes. I feel fully supported in our efforts to try and make our responses to that.
If I just. That is. Isn't it safe to assume some of those challenges and sorted out for the highway for Santa Fe River, Boston City and Hayward, just saying like it's.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's Hayward, but pretty much, pretty much, yeah, fires, pretty much, another part of the bridge, you have two bridges, fire. Similar. Border between.
We know it can be done.
So, I mean, it's kind of, you know.
okay. Okay, let's move on to item 15, which is to discuss the status of recommendations from the district's management audits.
This is one that has, I said I was gonna come back to the board, but so I'm gonna try to rather than this could be an hour's long session measurement. So here's my commitment, obviously. The management audit has a lot of valuable information on it, not every single one of their 83 items rose to the top of my list of things to do. Or even that we necessarily should do, there were several things in there I didn't necessarily agree with. So what I would like to highlight is those items that I prioritize at a high level and where we've made progress on. And under that concept, I always try and talk to staff and say, not everything can be our highest priority. And we have to recognize our workload, we can see everything is important. So we have prioritized the number of items and talk about it. If anybody has, what I would suggest, especially for the sake of time, is if there's any questions or you feel like an item maybe hasn't been correctly prioritized, or you have questions, reach out to me by phone or email, and sit down and maybe move it up or down, wherever I'm. There's a couple of items in the meeting that were related to the board, so I kind of brought those down, but I'm gonna just go through quickly and talk about items that I prioritize this by and some of the ongoing ones. First was on 293 related to this concept of the silo mentality, and that happens commonly in organizations who are making efforts. Part of this comes from leadership and the fact that we have a lot of hard workers that are very capable of doing their jobs. We've created a weekly executive staff meeting. Part of that is just so we can share ideas and what's going on and kind of work on things together. So some of it is just also saying out loud, these are our values, and I value collaboration. Part of it is trying to put our team in common locations to encourage hallway conversations and things like that. So that's an ongoing process, but we very much
appreciate the collaboration, the good ideas that come from a lot of. On things where we've had silos in the past where decisions are made and that they're not decisions, so we're working on that. There's a couple recommendations in here, they're looking at each other there in different places. We recognize that a lot of the comments that we received related to HR were the fact that we came in and, should say we had a very competent HR director that was in and we were aware of a lot of things that we were doing that weren't in alignment with laws, regulations. Anytime we make changes, it affects people's benefits. There's some unhappiness. So there's been a lot of time spent on communications. And we are trying to student people, giving them a lot of information. There is, I think what things are on the better path now with fully staff. We have really great staff. So that continues to be a high priority for us. Effective communications. Anytime there's changes for benefits, compensation, and everything else. And I think we got the right recharge and review. The recommendation 11/295 that was the system. We've already moved and now have a new vendor cruise sense. We're working with them on connecting them so that we're going to be piece of that. Already page 295.
The last yeah, I have recommendations.
Recommendation 11. It's interesting when AP tried came out with a lot of things, it was like, oh yeah, that's where we're doing it. Yeah, so we had already heard some of the pain points that we're having some challenges. A lot of this related to our inability to track overtime and having code. So we've selected a new vendor, TrueSense. We're working with them to try and figure out how we connect. Recommendation 12 already in progress. Everything that Branson and our negotiating are in new MOUs or renewing MOUs. We have lots of that's on it. Get that right about the end of the in progress. Recommendation 14 on the next page, our website. It wasn't in place in meeting tried to do the report, but as everybody's aware, our website's been updated. It's accessible, it will be translated into local language, and it's a work in progress. That was the original redesign is kind of our lipstick on a pig kind of fix. We had visions that there's some really beautiful websites on there. Our old website is painful, so this was the interim fix, and it may last us for a while. We have ongoing improvements that are happening probably every week of this. Recommendation 17, just using the word, and I'm one of this word that says that we've already changed every document that we can find that has a change of community member. Just to indicate that we represent anybody who happens to be in our district, no matter their status or state or whatever. So all we're going to do is that. Recommendation 18, there was again some complaints about safety and effectiveness of radio communications. This is one of the things that I came to the board with last year that the board supported, and it's already been fixed with our new radios that we've replaced that are in everybody's engines. So that is no longer an issue. Those were the recommendations 7 and 8 kind of tie into what I was talking about, just the overall comments that we received with HR and our focus on making sure that we're really clearly communicating with employees and their changes. Page 300 down towards the bottom. Recommendation 5 goes back to this kind of concept of silos. They again, hugely aware of how silos get formed and the challenges with breaking them apart are that they're very tough. So we're 6 recommendation 6 is key study done. Board's already included that. That's a key study for fire prevention team. They have to cover to that. So 303 down to the bottom, implement the new RMS. in progress. We switched to image trend for our in-person students, and that transition is in progress. 304, there's a number of guys on there. Recommendation week was the top, already done. It's the duplicate one about the fee schedule. These recommendations under what was termed OEM is, different. Talks about recommendation one with our listening tours with volunteers and our outreach. That's ongoing. High priority for us. Great, we feel that community volunteer coordinator position that was high, I've already done that. Developing a department strategy for OEM, now this new unit that's under Jonathan. That's an ongoing conversation, high priority for us in our engagement with our community volunteer groups, over this very big, and continuing ongoing communication with EPRA, and it's super high priority for us. Next page. Middle of the page, just the updating of the org chart, already been done. It's in our budget documents. It's still in flux, but it reflects our more current approach. So that's page on 306 middle, 70 last. Just in the middle, has to do with management meetings, and we've already kind of trended up our management meetings, and then also including people in longer parts. We were excluding folks. And just under the concept of making sure that we don't kind of share relevant information. We've done that. The suggestion for longer term organization-wide meetings 2-3 weeks ago. I did our first what will be an ongoing quarterly department-wide Zoom meeting. It's kind of town hall. That's the fire thing. Feedback we got so far has been really good. So those, there was a lot of excitement involved in there. Those were the things that initially were categorized as high priority. My request to you is to basically set the report is presented. If you have feedback on any of the items, we can certainly do it here. My recommendation is also communication with them, now whatever pleasure. With that, is
Any questions or comments, or would we just accept this?
I would accept one clarification. This is going to quick second. It was regarding rated as a low priority, but to me, it focused on the issue of training, conversation.
It's item 10 on page 295. It's the first one. Recommendation 10.
Right.
I want to have the training on how to engage in the full conversation.
Correct. So the thought was, and I mean, out of all of them, we have to choose something. But it seems to me that we're, wherever the category, but the thought was that fit into the part of, it may not fit into the wellness aspect of what was another category that going on. It seems like that part of an area that could be incorporated into that whole activity, under green and resources, to be able to kind of begin that conversation in the move, staff or individuals toward more inclusion into the organization. But not doing what the thought was in terms of how you perceive what that really, what that meant to you.
That's a great, is it in from that lens, it would, us having conversations about acceptance and inclusion are important, then would be higher risk. It's usually these courses are difficult conversations with subordinates. You know, kind of in that supervisor subordinate kind of thing. My guess is that was what the legal casting workshop was. Yeah, so it's not for purpose of inclusion, it's for accountability, performance reviews, and that's always a challenge with fire service because we put together trying to have a good, you know, the supervisor subordinate honest conversation when you have to eat dinner with that person and live with them, and that's an ongoing challenge in every fire department. But that's why I agree that is lower, because we're now in what you were talking about is more important conversations about how do we create an organization where everyone is part of the group, included, et cetera.
Yeah.
That's why that was that. And I can change that, but I also understand what you're talking about, and I agree that it should be medium or high.
Yeah, I think, and for me, it's for around here, you have to have a distinction if all of that are doing to have a relationship, right? If there is no relationship, then there's a difficult time to get harder to take place. So how do you do this? You know, I mean, you have to, you know, they are be better, but you know, how we do so some of understanding of the person where they are, and even you see the value, but you it's difficult one.
I would just recommend, I think these are really important things. I'd like to see the president sign these commitments for 4 committees, 3 committees. And obviously, you couldn't do them all in one meeting, or might take 6 months to do them. But I think we should go through them at a committee level, and each committee can discuss and forth. And what we might, once it's made in the committees. You know, my recommendation would be to make an assignment that we go through.
I mean, it's an interesting idea. I think the challenge is the length of time available. Window of time in committees to take on that additional challenge. I see this as kind of it's a management tool and it's a management guiding process. He's managing with his leadership team. Personally, I'm kind of uncomfortable with the reporting now. Chief is just done on a periodic basis. But I think it will be a burden of time on committees that the committees may not have. I certainly know that certainly on the finance committee, and we probably run out of time every meeting. Run right up against the agenda television.
What I think is important about these is they're not all strategic, but in general, they're more strategic than a lot of things on our agenda. And I think they take them long. And I think it's something, I agree that the time is short of committee meetings, but I don't know that the board meeting here is better venue. Even if we had just 2 directors talk about it, I think it might bring up something that we want to carry forward. I don't know, I just would hate to lose this.
There's 2 on the first page where I think where we talk about, I think the recreation. It talks about all the ones with that it's not doing, and it talks about yeah, I think that's an area that is, you know, that we have talked about for time and we have the problem about before as it's a moot point, and go with the two areas is that if you, any time that way, could be, committee to look at. Item 4, the interior board adherence to board policy of 1.2, is there any policy about governing policy? We're clear that policy we can look at and monitor the stuff and figure that out. I don't think we're really staffing it. So areas like that, you're pleased that they have this problem work. No staff.
I would be willing to, look through this with the vice president, with the board. Or issue, the areas I mentioned before, and to make. Well, and I'm happy, maybe that's the best place to start first, because otherwise, I agree with Gary, it's going to be a lot of work. I mean, so Gary, should you, if the vice president, want to work to do this, we have to do this with the chief and sponsor.
No, I'm fine going. In the nature of it, it's several hours.
Is that one okay?
I think they would be already.
Right, it's
Definitely.
right, it's board, really.
The other.
Well, I think you take a stab at the board and just first, I don't think the chief's going to touch on that, but we're still. The main issue is all of before, it's related to the board. So if everyone is comfortable with the vice president and the president, we keep on this, we're looking at where it fit in the committee structure. And I think I'm going to do it. We volunteer and Gary to do it. Is everyone okay with that? Okay. We're going to move something. Pretty much we need to item 15. Set provisions to the board of the records and policies and procedures in the annual. It's been prepared by Michelle, Michelle, it's our annual update on all of this, and so, I know, so I have looked at this, I didn't give it to Michelle, I know that Gary is the only person that has given policy. What is the best way to do? I mean, we can go through this page by page. I mean, it is 10 o'clock and we're pretty much at the very end of item 17, which is the board goals, to circle back on where we are in those board goals, right? But I mean, I don't know, I think a lot of these changes are really easy. And I want to thank Michelle for doing this in the area. I'm happy to open it up for discussion right now because this is. Sorry.
Have we all reviewed it?
I have.
Comments?
Yes, I mean, so I'm willing to make a motion to approve Michelle's,
Well, Gary's also, so do you have other things you want to in your do on this good time to do? Well, Gary's already.
Yeah, let's move to, we can, we say, you reviewed it. I think the context is, maybe there's been over a year of time in terms of listening and doing the board integrating the documents, so it's not like something that we have something to talk about.
Yeah, some cases, were discussed during the past year, so I noted them and made those corrections. And then some came from the article.
Jeff, do you have comments?
I have a thought. I think that if we discuss it, it takes 1 hour. And some of these are very significant changes.
We can put it on until next month.
Well, to that, it's going to be page by page.
I mean, I think that the first page would be, it has to be
I mean, there's no dispute on who the, committee members are, right?
That's what we not even look at them involved. So we put what the assignments are, but not the names. Because if we review this in June, it's out of date for the first half of the year and it's only valid for half the year. And then it's invalid. It seems to me that there's no reason to put people's names.
I think it's actually a good reminder that we can do what.
It is, in fact, it's for 6 months.
Yeah.
6 months.
I mean, yeah.
Can I just say that the committee and liaison assignments are posted to the website? So staff agrees with the director we're making regarding this recommendation. Because anybody can go to our website and see who's on what committee, what liaison assignment it is, and it's noted there. So it's inaccurate for half a year, which seems inefficient.
What do you want?
The name.
Yeah.
So you're just taking track and maybe just keep the committees there.
Keep the assignments as assignments, but not the names associated with them.
Right, but then we do the list of the committees
So they're more than.
and the liaisons and all of that. Basically, this page with no names.
Director Chantrell, would I maybe,
Yes.
so, this is the board policy, so, I feel free to just shut me down, because it's not my document, it's your document. But I wonder, it seems to me a very important document. Foundational for how the board governs the district and how you get along with each other and the processes. And, I have, since I've joined the district, been a little frustrated with the way in which the policy is amended and revised, to tell you the truth. The process of soliciting individual comments from directors in a few weeks, and then at the end of the late meeting at 10 p.m., trying to figure out what to do. I think that I mentioned in the report from Michelle, that I'm happy to stand shoulder to shoulder with her to suggest that it's time for a more comprehensive refresh of this document, even if it's only to validate and reaffirm what's already in there. And I would suggest a more holistic approach that might take a number of months, might take more than one visit to the board to see what's what. And I think it seems appropriate that Michelle and I take the leading oar in that effort to present to you a really fantastic, professional, up-to-date, legally compliant, procedurally effective manual we can consider rather than the piecemeal, let's take this word and let's take that one. So I don't mean to derail your idea of going through page by page, but I guess if I were king, I would say, let's live with it in its current state, and maybe in 6 months or 8 months after an ongoing process, assuming you like the idea, a more holistic set of revisions might be presented for your consideration. So that's
I
my.
was like, what does everyone else think?
Well, I think, people have put time into looking at the documents and making comments. As well as, Michelle beginning to kind of recall and refresh our wishes at the time we looked at that, policy. I'm okay with 6 months down the road or 8 months down the road, getting to refresh, but some of these activities that are highlighted here, should be implemented the right way. Just because we're going to keep doing the same, having the same behavior pattern again, at a really every month. So the question is, you want to you want that to happen, you can't fix that, you're in mind. But, you ensure that when you, something, policies that have created a different type of attitude toward how we do business. And it's not implemented that, you're going to continue to see the same problem that created the issue.
Well, we could approve these edits and then have a hold. We've gone through this. I mean, Michelle, what do you prefer? You're really kind of helping the line previously. So leave it as is without edits or with the current.
Well, I mean, I can only speak to ones that I recommend that are obvious ones, like if we're not going to leave the liaison, community liaison assignments, then just update it like we normally do. So that at least it's accurate for the second half of the year. And then Steve and I will figure out what to do with it for the maybe longer, right? So for now, we can just set that.
Well, I mean, I think Director Williams really put in some thought that I.
Well, yeah, well, that's just saying, I'm just thinking of the ones that I have. And there's some miscellaneous things that were cleaned up when Steve and I go through it, that like classroom B is a no-brainer, right? Yeah.
Well, Michelle, in fairness, we deferred some of the recommendations I had in our conversation, we deferred some of the recommendations I had based on the comments that says that's a section that needs to be completely redone.
Yeah.
And so I kind of said, okay, well, fine, let's table those. To Robert's point, my edits here are based on, my observations of how the board has operated in the 6 months I've been on the board. And these, and for a short period of time before when I listened to the board sessions. And I think these are necessary changes, and I don't think there's any downside to including them. And I have to tell you, it's like, just because, 4 out of 5 board members didn't do what was asked, which is provide evidence, to me, there's not warrant the notion that says, pass out all the work, okay, well, like, hand it down the road. I think that's unfair. To be perfectly honest, by fellow board members here, we were all given an opportunity to get this. And, I get that a major revision is probably going to, but these incremental changes are not totally going to do.
Yeah, I agree.
I think the one from Bill is relatively here, the last time you had here, to monitor it and to document, go on the same thing with the people have to be at work, and that I'm asking for to make these changes. Don't clear the people who have done it. Project.
Well, so we could accept all of the changes, which will be another one, we can give the argument. We can accept all the edits from that are presented today, and then have a holistic approach moving forward from that one. Or we can have, the launch point be the previous policies and procedures without the edits, and then have this holistically done, or go with this detail. Yeah, those would be, and there are probably other options.
The holistic review should be done off of how it currently exists at the point in time they're going to start the review.
Well,
Not based on some prior version.
well, that's what I'm saying. You're
I'm saying approve. Yeah, right. I'll second that motion. And then that does not negate the need. That does not negate the need to do a holistic review, right?
And then cycle.
Well, I have to discuss. Are you okay with that?
No, not. But
Okay,
let's not hold it. And record check, anybody has comment there, I think you should hear this out of that.
I think that. But half of the things that are in here are not controversial, and that would be fine and so forth. Some of these things are controversial. And. I mean, it seems like we ought at least discussing now, in fairness, the idea of Steve and Michelle going through things where we have to have a discussion with them. I mean, some of you have to program this, say, well, at this point, there's a disagreement, we're gonna bring this back to the board. So I don't think you could decide policies, and I'm saying this with the view that probably at least two of these sort of target that need, which is fine, but we'll at least have a discussion, because creating something where we put in one of these kind of hot button reactive kinds of things just is not, you can change the words in here, but that doesn't mean you change behavior. And so I think, I mean, some of these about censure and all this kind of stuff, this is pretty heavy stuff. I don't think we could just say, oh, yeah, accept them all. Some of these go against the long-standing traditions of this board, like that residents can put something on an agenda. That's something that's long-standing, we're taking pride in that people come here, just to say, oh, that policy's gone without discussion. I don't think it's fair. So, I think we could have a discussion, so on items tonight if you want, for half an hour or whatever. But at some point, you ought to have that discussion. But I think just have this blanket thing that says, okay, we just pass everything. I mean, there's typos, there's mistakes, and I don't think we want to just accept everything. But in a sense, it doesn't really matter to me, because I think, I mean, my behavior is going to be governed by the role that I have. My statutory role, and not by some bad words and something that puts in there. So if you think
doesn't bring the sort of knowledge you can do, it's not really going to impact anyone's. It's really what you're saying.
no, I'm not saying.
It's basically not being important.
I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is, if somebody makes a criticism of a feature in the district, and one of the employees happens to feel humiliated, that's not a fault necessarily of the board. The board is responsible for people's feelings. And what created the what? If somebody does a bad job, they're very honestly humiliated. But it's up to the board to talk about effective services, quality services, and just to say, oh, God, the person wants people, we're going to wait.
Chuck, with all due respect, I think you.
But you know what, I don't have a chance to say, I'm just saying to you that I stand here to offer the residents who elected me high quality services. When I don't think it's happening, I'll speak up about it. And I hate to say this, but in some ways, I don't really care about it. If that's, I care about how the residents get service. And if somebody does a job that gives our residents lives in danger for extended periods of time, I'm going to speak up about it. And I don't care, you know, if you decided to censure me for it, fine, but it doesn't make any difference. Now, let me see, I think people should be respected. I think everyone's deserving of respect. And I do appreciate that. And I think to the extent that we have realistic guidelines that we talk about, I think that could be helpful. With this idea that we're never going to say anything negative about anything. Sorry, that's just not going to be what I do. So it's, you can go too far. See, I can turn it around and say, gee, you mean you say you have to say positive things about me all the time? Is that what you're saying? No, I don't think that's what you're saying, but that's how you ridicule when I'm, and I don't want you to ridicule when I'm not sure.
I mean, you're essentially saying you don't want to.
Don't tell me what I'm essentially saying. Just speak up for yourself.
Chuck, listen. You don't like the idea that there's comment here about public humiliation, but this is exactly what it says. In order to threaten any such public humiliation to unduly influence decisions of the work of fire district personnel. That's exactly what you did with your letter about 2 months ago on the budget. Is if you don't all agree with me on the board. I'm gonna publicly humiliate employees. And I don't think board members should be doing that. And I think there is a responsibility for the board members to defend the staff that the board behave properly. And it's the board's job to self-regulate board behavior. There's an ongoing pattern of mistreating employees in the district by the board. And I think we should put a stop to it. And the policies will be placed that allow that to occur.
So those are.
And if you want to continue that, then we don't need the policy.
So Chuck, I think there's a difference. I think it's how a message is delivered versus the quality control you're bringing up. No one, I think, on this board wants to sprint on the quality of service that we provide to the residents of the district. I don't believe any of us want staff. And I know that the staff don't want that, our crews don't want that, no one wants that. But I think that what I'm afraid of is if we don't at least address the issue. We already had a letter from one of our bargaining units asked me. And I don't want the board to be put in a liable, in the district, to be put in a liable situation. That, might cause a harassing work environment or. I don't even remember it's hostile work environment, that kind of thing, which I think can happen. And I don't think that it's fair to say that you're the only one who wants good quality services. That's not true. But I do think that we have to figure out a way to deliver a message that may not be the message that everyone wants to hear, especially the chief, since he's the guy that we have to deliver a message to, right, and direct. But I think there's a way to do that, that's more productive. And constructive criticism is always a good thing. And the chief, I know, respects any constructive criticism that we give him and how we rank him too, and Michelle, they all do. I think they try to be as responsive as possible. So, and that's. We'll see where it's coming from. So, I don't think anyone's full of anyone. I have to go on that.
I think we have a motion to second.
So, okay, so, we have to vote on the calling of the question. So there's a vote in the call of question. I guess we need a second for that motion. There's a motion.
I would draw it.
So is that the revisions?
Yes, I think draw
Is, okay, so does that mean that there's no reason to call for the vote now?
unless someone else wants to make a motion.
If someone else like, they like to do, their motion to accept,
I really see it not policy. It's
and then, and also do the whole list of permit. Okay, is there a second? Okay, for you, now there's a motion by Director Bloom, the Director Solano withdrew his motion. Director Bloom made the motion to accept the revisions with, the process of doing a holistic approach on this under the current revised process procedure, policies and procedures, and Director Jones seconded that. Okay, so Director Jones is also now calling for the question. Is that correct, Director Jones?
I thought further discussion is.
So there's, okay, so do you want to withdraw your motion to call for the question?
That would be the second one. So first.
Because we're gonna be opening up for discussion. So we can
Now.
discuss it as well.
Right. We still want discussion, right?
Correct.
Okay.
I just wanted to make sure that.
You know, it talks about board member discipline, which Chuck had brought up. I mean, if we're looking at censure and resolution, I mean. Censure and resolution can be passed by a majority of three boards, but there's no penalty. Not removable, it's a censure, okay? But it's not even an enforceable aspect. I mean, it doesn't do a thing. The majority of the board is tilted in one direction or another. An elected person representing the voters here, district, we have a right, okay, to feel how we feel relative to a particular situation. And if there, you know, as to this employee thing, I mean, yeah, it's a dual-edged sword, you know. Are you, you know, polite? You don't bring up examples relative to it, you bring it to the chief, well, fine. But there's some things that may warrant, I don't know what, to bring it up and identify what's going on relative to employee conduct. It's so strong that an individual that is elected can say something. So I'm reading the censure under this board member discipline. And, you know, so what? You know, you're gonna go through and say that I shouldn't have said the word whatever, or I shouldn't have brought up the place when I had maybe individuals within my district, you know, within the district, they called me and said that this employee, you know, needs to be reassigned or whatever. You know, I would handle it a little differently. I would go to the chief and say, chief, I have this complaint relative to, you know, would I bring it in a public setting? How strongly, you know, what was the misconduct? I mean, is it something that's going to warrant maybe criminal matters? I mean, I don't know, but this right here, you know, I think it's, you know, I don't think it lacks anything other than what Treasurer DeForest feels way about an individual board member.
You're referring to section 5.10.
Excuse me.
Are you referring to 5.10?
You can either five, no, I mean, that's the which section. Oh, I'm sorry, 5.10.
So just so you know, there was actually no change there, just separate, you know, paragraph 2.
But if you look through the 5.11, it says those directors shall provide member materials, communications to the press. I mean, I just feel that if you're an elected official and you represent people that voted for you in the district, it's brought to your attention certain improprieties, you know, there are certain ways to handle those things. And some people handle it one way, some people handle it the other way. But that's no resolution thing. Yeah, bring it. I mean, oh,
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, isn't censure, but that's something that can be done whether or not it's in board policy. Is that correct?
That is not necessarily correct. I mean, it's difficult to have an enforceable censor action without it being based on the board adopted policy.
It's enforceable, but you can still censure. I thought that was part of it.
Not really. I mean, you could do it and it's something to challenge it and you probably use that challenge. How many years has this been in?
Which is just forever.
It's new.
Yeah, Robert, you had a comment.
Yeah. There's but issues like this are perfect. And it's not really getting the board because it's Rob alluded to, has been on board. He is 3-2, and then all of a sudden 3-2 voting it, vote for the following next year, there's 3-2 on a flip, and the question really becomes with that board is one, when we take accountability for we're in action. And how do you know, if there's, you know, if I got 5 kids who's somewhere to get it in that in mind, if talking on it, you know, and what is the next option? Is to figure out someone that will work, and if that doesn't work, then Republicans take action at this time.
There's full personality. But until then, there has to be a managing board, functioning managing board. And these policies are supposed to help. I, all my different board, they help steer the board and guide the movement of the board in the same way, manner. From working in some aspect. And it's no fun. I say because of that. But I always said it was important for that board to visit the private need and service. And that's all we all do. But when at it in so many different ways, that becomes a big point to the community. From the board. So I think we need to adopt something that's going to keep into a policy and just move on. Yeah, and if people are going to get one don't like it, you know, it's unfortunate, but again, you gotta have these difficult conversations, you know, but I still like it. But we still have to what we consider acceptable and unacceptable behavior. And some of the stuff that unacceptable behavior, I don't think calling people out, staff or in public, that's going to come to do that, because I'm expecting it too much in that regard. And I think college should be one that could showing respect for staff and showing respect for our community and our volunteers. You know, when you grow up in the time, you got to show that respect. And we should have 24/7, not on night and tomorrow night. 24/7.
Yeah, I think there are some things that I think, legal, for example, which is prohibition, no director shall directly provide board materials, memos, written communications, or emails to the press. This is public information. There's no way you can say, oh, you can't give public information to the press. It's just simple. And I think that there ought to be some respect for the board policies. So if you want to write things that aren't enforceable or that are kind of silly in the face of it, you know, you certainly have the freedom to do that. I don't think
that it's silly to remove provisions in the policy.
no, I didn't say, I did say it was silly. I think if the board made a resolution, you couldn't give a public document to a member of the press.
I'm a little reluctant to join this discussion amongst board members, but the answer to the question is yes.
Board member?
Sure.
Actually, it says director, but you know, you still as a personal matter, have a personal right to do it. I think, and I'm correct me if I'm wrong, Gary, but the personal right situation here is not acceptable because based on this to a board member. So if you were to do something like that, it would have to come from you personally, not as a board member. That's a very different proposition.
Well,
let's take.
let me just clarify my answer. If you can't say in this policy what is or is not consistent with statutes or constitutions, but you can prohibit something by policy. And if you do it, board member engages in something that you said board member should not do, that board member would be in violation of district policy. That doesn't have anything to do with whether that board member's conduct is illegal or criminal or unconstitutional, which is in violation of district policy. Thank you.
May I ask?
Yes.
Our lawyers? If you take the definition, you can't get the part. Talks about conferred on board members by the law, okay? Or if by their actions they fail to fulfill their petitionary duty to the district. The right to censure your fellow elected officials established by case law. Are there any like whistle references relative to this? Where that case law could be either a civil or criminal ramification involving the right of censure? Ask the question again. I'm sorry, I don't understand. Okay, we have censure. The board will vote to censure someone. Okay, and then it talks about due process, hearing on charges. What type of hearing on charges does that involve?
Okay, so there is perhaps the reference in that section of the policy, but there is case law that holds that censure implicates rights of directors that are protected by due process. And so before the board censures someone, that director is entitled to a due process hearing. The essence of due process,
Where's the jurisdiction? Here.
the essence of due process is notice and opportunity.
So it's a kangaroo. It's a kangaroo. No, why is it there? The opinion report. The only thing I'm thinking report is playing within the three rules rather than both of them.
Which, by the way, has happened repeatedly in the past, so maybe this will clean up that behavior. There's a motion and a second on the table. Any other discussion?
So there's a number of typos and things like that. Should we pass this, Michelle, in a sense, order to publish this as with typos, or is she authorized to correct it, or what is the instruction in terms of after?
The red line.
Yes, well, I was just reading page 326, first line. In the red. It says no director shall directly provide board materials, memo apostrophe S. This has it. That doesn't make any sense. But I'm just wondering how much change he's authorized to do.
I can pick the.
I mean, sometimes the record is capitalized, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's called the mental health fire protection district, sometimes it's called the fire. I mean, there's
Well, that's
all-
part of it. That needs to be
Yeah, yeah,
done.
yeah.
So, that's throughout the whole policy is like that, so.
So I'm just asking, what, when we vote on it, they take it word for word, everybody thinks, what's the direction from the board?
You made the motion.
General sense, I haven't looked through this as a general sense, okay, but there's a lot of things in here that are ridiculous. As a general sense, we have a policy manual. And then it goes against some basic rights that we have, not only as citizens of freedom of speech, but as representation of our electorate. So there's a dual-edged sword here. But as a general purpose. Yeah. But, you know, I'm a regulatory guy, coming from a law enforcement background, words mean a lot. If we're doing the general sense here with this document, I could go fences, then text, or whatever, if that's where we would go. But the way Chuck is talking, I mean, Chuck is finding some grammatical errors. I'm finding. I'm fine, modify it to say subject to Michelle, grammatic. But I brought this in general, so there were, I can tell you that, Michelle, there were typos, if you spend the time, I spent the time reading that, there's typos throughout the document.
My belief on that is you're planning an overhaul, clean all that up at the time you're working. In the meantime, what we're trying to do is exactly what Robert said, which is put some guidelines in front of you. You know, that regulate how the board operates and how the board behaves. And so that, you know, we can work professionally with each other and professionally with the staff and properly represent the people that have elected us to be here. You know, with reasonable decorum and reasonable respect. And I don't think anything that I propose goes outside of that.
Yeah, and so, I'm just gonna say, in the 11 years I've been on this board, in the 11 years I've been on this board, I mean, it's, these typos have been here. So I think it's about time for the overhaul. So there is a motion and a second. We've already discussed this. So Gary has actually amended his motion to have you, yeah, to be fixed. Right. So that's the amended motion, which Director Jones seconded. Any other discussion?
It's been going back and forth here.
It's basically.
Okay, so motion to that. Right, this is just Director Clinton. Is making a motion to accept the provisions for driving policy and procedures manual and doing an over, and after that's complete, doing an overall update. That staff will work on, and then do the motion also to include any fixing typos in this red line version of what was submitted.
Right, but it would be staff and legal counsel working together.
Yes,
I'm wrong with
But,
those. Yeah, but I think that's interesting.
It's correctly reflected, thank you.
And that was seconded by Director Jones. Yeah, so any other question, if not, let's do a roll call.
Director Bernstein,
There.
Director Bloom,
Aye.
Director Jones,
I,
Director Swan,
Aye.
Director Crawley.
Aye, so that motion carried. Thank you. Moving on to item 17. I know that this is something that Gary have been on top of, which is basically just to do a review of our goals and where we are, the board goals for 2023. So I'm here to want to take the lead on this.
Yeah.
We should have not.
Yeah, so I'm going to do it at a very high level, similar to the way that she did. Is, you know, recognizing what time it is. I think what's most important about, you know, the board goals is that the director periodically look at the board goals and actually say how we influence them. And so I would point out that most everything here is work in progress. There were two categories of goals that I kind of look at and say we really haven't made any material progress on. And I think it's worth highlighting the two we haven't made material progress on. And the first one is goal number 1, the enhanced board through data and analytics. I think we're in a position where we're still waiting for data. This is data we've talked about, the desire to have and the desire to use in our foundational decision making. So it's just, I would point out we haven't made progress on 1.1, 1.2, 1.3 as far as having a data package during the board. And the whole purpose of reviewing it is, it's not a report card to grade anybody's effort or anything else, as much as to remind all of us, remind staff that this was the goal we set, and we haven't made progress on it. It needs to continue to be on the list. We need to try to make progress. And similarly, the multi-year strategic plan, we haven't had any real material progress work done on the work of the multi-year strategic plan. And I think everything else that's here in one way or the other is largely has some aspect of work in progress and being addressed predominantly within the committees. Whether it be DEI, we haven't solved all these issues, but they are being worked on in committees. Same thing with many of the oversight and governance issues, and the emergency prep is certainly work in progress within the committee, within staff. Chief Johnson's putting a tremendous amount of time on it with his new one employee. Staff out. So, yeah, I think the net of this is, like I said, the real benefit is for us just to acknowledge, look at it, acknowledge where we're making some progress and where we're not making progress. And it'd be items 1 and 4 where, you know, kind of my assessment of things is that we haven't made material progress. Includes my update on the goals.
Any thoughts or comments on this?
Now, I just want to share this whole together, and I think at some point, the next step, I think kind of look at you really the workflow that the community there, the community kind of work out and sort of dishing it out and work with them.
I mean, income is just work staff needs to do it, just hasn't worked its way out. Yeah, like the data. I know the chief's working on getting data, it's not, nothing's happening. But, yeah, sitting here today, we don't have the data.
Any other comments? Okay, thank you, Karen. Next item is proposed agenda items. Are there any proposed agenda items? Not, we'll go to reports and requests, committee reports, emergency preparedness, Karen.
So emergency prep, we spent time with really two kind of things that we've done. And one was Chief Johnson did give us an update for my notes, but I can do that up in this. Chief Johnson gave us an update on kind of the identified kinds of risks that he's focused on. That was one of our agenda items, was to get a better understanding of something he had mentioned previously, that, you know, kind of the foundation of community prep and disaster planning, and starts with what risks are you planning for. And so he walked the committee through, you know, kind of a more holistic list of kind of the things that are on his radar and the topics that are on his radar for what kinds of events we're actually planning for. And then I think the secondary item that is really a little bit of centered around the process side of the committee, which is, you know, we've been in kind of a mode, part of the staff shortage on the staff side of the committee trying to solve the problem versus staff trying to solve the problem with the recommendations, committee that policy. And so we kind of consciously acknowledge that we need to make a shift in the committee to take the lead of staff, really establishing what we're talking about, what policies are ready to be vetted and so forth, and go back to our guidance role versus being kind of directly involved in the solution itself. Yeah, so reviewing solutions, reviewing recommendations, reviewing policy changes. And I think safe to say, I think they tapped out already on this. And Chief Gotts and I think was in agreement with that shift now that he has a person working with them and they are starting to develop the plans. I think it's good news, but you know, definitely the narrative has been affected by staff. That would be my committee report. Chuck, I don't know if you have anything to add.
Robert, you can start. Give me I'm just trying to go through this.
I think you talk about that, and I think the main highlight is that it's really the that are coming out. And I don't have to go over it, and it's happening to all the point data bonds for BEI that we're looking at. For one to look at and go more. Like, you know,
Yeah, so then I think we went over kind of the tool, and then we just speak straight the questions with the committee. And we'll bring that back and summarize and have a lot of feedback, and we can usually there after the committee will close the meeting.
moving forward. We're not gonna eat.
Oh, no.
Six shot.
I don't know. We can do that. So,
Yeah, one comment. So I just want to thank you for your meeting with the president for getting that tool ready and very finally and looking forward to saying, I gotta get my feedback. It's good. Yeah, I think it's good, but I probably wouldn't have a lot of feedback. I just started looking at it. But I'm just excited to see what kind of response we get. You want to explain a little bit of the tool? And what the deadlines are and what we're going to do.
Yeah, so the UBI 360 is, kind of it's an online survey. That we will send out, it will be voluntary, also, will be anonymous. And it's just kind of asking questions regarding, how the district is doing in terms of training, in terms of, equal opportunities for like advanced mentorship, representation across, basically different ethnic backgrounds, gender, LGBTQ. So that's kind of a lot of specific questions, and we're trying to limit it, because we want to encourage participation. So, we could add more questions to the one interested in, maybe, or trying to keep it to, hopefully like, some minutes for completion. And then what happens is when we get the data back, then, the consultant will meet with us and we can go through and kind of, basically carve the data. What they're used to is, reviewing the data to look for kind of things. And then providing recommendations, to the peers on moving forward. And from there, we can take those recommendations to kind of make some progress. Or they can constantly show us kind of implement some changes. So it's kind of full service, organization, that we're using, but right now, it's the one way to get feedback.
I'm wondering to what extent you can trust the data that you get back from an anonymous survey, particularly when you're dealing with topics that some people are very serious about.
I hope that, people will be, candid and honest, and if they don't want to, then maybe they don't complete the survey, but, I'm hoping that we'll be able to collect, that it would be helpful. And I think we'll also have, most of the questions will be kind of ranking different areas or topics, but that we will have kind of one or two open questions that are going to provide feedback. Regarding how we're doing or any other kind of feedback that we have. Yeah, I'm hopeful that we will have honest feedback.
This is the first two things that I just. One is that it might be worthwhile to try to get surveys back that are anonymous from anybody who felt comfortable doing that, which might help you calibrate what you did get back.
Yeah, well, some of the questions that we will be asking, will be, just in relation to their position at the district, their tenure. We'll have kind of like banding, with their 2-year employee, 2 to 4, their positions. And so, we will be kind of hopefully calibrating with that, based on position with the district, their tenure with the district, to kind of determine the really see patterns with the data. I'm not sure about, I guess, employees actually having asked consultants if their information if we can collect. But typically, employees are feel more comfortable being, candid in the process if it is anonymous. That's kind of my experience with doing surveys is that when you do allow for that, they kind of will trust themselves.
Yeah, I just, when you're talking about sexual preferences and things like that, I who knows, maybe they will. Stuff, just not sure, to the extent we want to, I assume, not we, but staff or whatever, we want to look at this to perhaps propose some programs or do something with it.
Yeah.
I just don't know how dependable and viable it is. I know there are things where you can do some sampling to test that a little bit. We were going to consult them. You might just ask about some sort of reliability testing or something.
Thank you. Francine, just a quick question. I know that in the committee, we talked about the responses being anonymous, right? But they're supposed to go back to you, or is they're option, they're to go to some consultants, and so then they will kind of like work with us to kind of carve the data so that when the results come through, we can identify the person in a specific role or so it will truly be anonymous. Anyone in the district. Yeah. I able to make sure if I made this understood before, there's going to go back to you instead of the consultants. In other words, they're responsible for the. Yes, yeah. Okay. Yeah, they're responsible. Okay, thank you, Barbara. The other thing for. Yeah, thank you. Finance, Rob.
Pretty interesting, except, Menlo Park Rating came to us, they spoke about establishing a grant program for the volunteer members of the district. I think a great idea. I mean, I remember when Chuck and I were in emergency prep, we were trying to get that done in that job, like 6 years, having them trying to put a grant program together so the volunteer group could apply for them, and then there'd be some type of review process. And Brian, who's the previous project manager or whatever his title, came up with something and kind of parallel the immigrant questionnaire, and it died. So it appears the volunteers are looking for that. So that'll be something we can put on the agenda for our next meeting.
Well, we're past that agenda item. Do you want to propose that? Are you proposing? So which agenda, the finance committee agenda or the board agenda?
No, the finance committee, that we can discuss this.
Well, I mean, I think it should probably go on the board agenda to see if that's something we want to discuss. So if you're willing to put it on a proposed agenda, as a proposed agenda item, we can take a vote on that when we move past that item. I'm happy to go back.
Fine. Right.
Right.
Yes, it's,
So I, just with the board want to discuss that at this time.
yeah, that makes sense. We can see, it's random, if you want to stay out and discuss.
I mean, I agree that, it's not a debate for us right now. But Rob, finance, talk about, and then have this for the board.
Well, when you see the board, it's directed to go to the committees. I mean, that's all in here. That's generally the rule. Right, and so that's why we probably need to have a clean, but the current rule is that, so if we want to have. We can get the direction move on, put it on the agenda, if that's what this board wants to do, and I'm fine with that. I just want to try to get the rules to be at least respected and observed. So if we want to give direction, we're wrong, put it on a finance committee agenda, that's fine. We can do it right here, right now, and say, Rob.
Or is it a motion?
No, we could make a motion to have Rob put it on the finance committee agenda, the possible grant program for the volunteer.
I don't know that it's me.
So right now. The appointment and compliance with our board policies and procedures. Director Jones has made a motion to allow Director Sawano, the chair of the finance committee, to put an item on the finance committee's agenda to discuss a possible grant program for volunteer groups. And that,
Well, second.
not yet, I'll in a second.
And what's your question?
No, I'm just calling out the issue. If you got clarification, yeah, so Director Bernstein. Yeah. Okay, any discussion?
Excuse me,
Yeah.
Michelle, could you read the motion? Thank you.
Classes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And I think that's not state.
Your motion was done, huh?
Right. So the motion is by Director Jones, seconded by Director Bernstein to add an agenda item against the to discuss a grant program.
Great.
Okay, right,
Thank you.
that's what, clarify, okay. Roll call. Director Bernstein,
Alright.
Director Lynn.
Aye.
Director Jones, Director Sawano,
Aye.
Director Crawley, aye. So that's good. Okay, anything else, Rob?
That's it.
Okay.
I think we covered everything.
This is the big meeting with finance and stuff.
It seems like everything's.
Okay, liaison reports, coming after the year.
Just to continue dialogue on their housing element and the whole AU situation. And I suspect there's a meeting tomorrow, I'll attend, and I suspect it'll be the same agenda item yet again, occupying 80% of the meeting. Yeah, the only other thing they've been doing is finding a little bit of this and handing us some over. And talking about pickleball courts and chargers and EV chargers are. And, but otherwise, it's like having a moment. For 90% of that, I'm very excited.
East Palomar, Robert.
I don't have. That's.
Robert, District 3 and 4.
Yeah, I attended the office for management. They had a communication coordination with them. And Middle Park was. Far, it was well represented. Thank you, Chief, for sending it in there. I mean, they went over real well. They, and it was, the conference was sponsored by Pride, San Diego County, which is a group of nonprofits. And, it went over very well, I thought. That's all I have there. Thank you.
The ambulance GPA, you can kind of.
No,
Yeah, next week. Are they having September meeting? They have a meeting, right?
They haven't provided a date.
Ad hoc committees, water facilities.
We get into everything we talk about. We have, but we have. Talk about going into, go project and go. Talk about. Along with. And process. You go to the, you know, the idea about. Looking at body. That's all. Very clear right now. 13.
No, I think it established the process. Yeah, the focus was a little bit oriented towards the station one facility. We talked about that in the context of having what are the priorities, and then to Robert's point is, you know, how do we get the board's, you know, kind of opinion in the process, so that the staff is not off developing plans for something the board does or doesn't have interest in. But Robert outlined a terrific set of processes, anything I've ever seen, so compliments to the process.
We
we did good.
Okay, so, dispatch, I think, kind of got covered in the University's report and the chief's comments, and Chuck, thank you so much for doing that. Do you have anything you want to add?
No, we covered.
Okay, reports and requests from the director. Okay, the president's report, we talked about the firework situation, even though it's been out there, the problem to school, things maybe at Montauk Middle School and the Village Brook School, where the fireworks are going off and literally setting off alarms and making, pets and animals nervous, that people were very concerned about putting the fires there. So I mean, we can talk about that before. I met with the founder of Safe Space, Susan Bird. They provide, mental health services for basically like a peer support group, and they're right next door to Baby Six. So, I think they want to come to make a comment about what they do. I know it's like, it's a new kind of organization, may not be relevant, but there could be some things that we can learn from it. She's very excited about the things that we're looking at as a district for mental health support. You can that for us. Also met with Kelly Ferguson, who's the former mayor of Menlo Park and a council member, about the EDU issue. How he said that situation that he was talking about. So I think she'll probably call you to go and take a look at it. And said, she told me that you talked to her. The ADU is right in her backyard, that someone else's front yard, and I don't know what the space requirements are for any, but I do think it's workable. She thinks that given the ADU laws that her house maybe she's in big for the state of California, may be true, there may be one other case someplace else that is already been dealing with this, but I do think that we should look at that. And finally, I want to thank the staff for preparing Station 6. We have to be our meeting room today. I mean, in 2020, Robert, when we became president of the board, we were trying to go to the different stations, and then the pandemic hit. I was thinking that we can kind of continue that with 3 new stations that we should be very proud of. So this is the first one that I wanted to come to celebrate the girl, to shout at them as well, and hopefully get Station 2. We'll go back to that station again in July or August, and I'll be honored Chief Blue, and I kind of want to, honor partnerships with law enforcement, and he's the first Asian and the only Asian police chief in San coming out of our fire district, and so I'm very proud of that. And I think the chief is trying to figure out which month is the best month, so hopefully we can do Station 2 and we can have this set up again. And then hopefully in October, we'll do Station 4 and honor Sheriff Christina Corpus, because Station 4 is in the unincorporated area of the district, and she is the first Latino sheriff in the state of California. So I think that's really cool to me. And I'm thinking this is just to show everyone that we do take the partnership with law enforcement very seriously. We respect it online partnership. That's all I do. Yeah, sure.
I should say, I had a really quick 20-second.
Yeah.
This I should have done this for your report. The Willows is losing a major community resource. I just wanted people to know about it. Cafe Go has been the center there. Cafe Go has been very active in terms of that night out and having community meetings there. Willows, certain meetings there and so forth. And he is leaving now, the person, losing money and contributing for a long time. And it won't close because the pizza guy is there, is taking over it stays. But Kathleen has been, thank you. You know, she would.
Is she retired?
She was around here. She wasn't out of cafe, so I think I need to be made from cafe, so she's gone. It's soon, I don't know the exact answer, but I think it's just in a month or so. I did. I just want people to know about it.
Okay,
Yes.
okay, so I think we're done with that part. I've never written for there's public comment number 2, and I'd like to open up the meeting and then make a public comment. You don't have to.
I think we should get a word.
Okay.
You said this whole thing, you gotta go on. You gotta go. I'm JT, from the organization Squato, called this squad. Reserve member, we're concerned about public health and safety and just making the community better. And thank you guys for what you do. Yeah.
You did it, right? Thank you. So now let's just adjourn back into the closed session. We're gonna reconvene the closed session. So one can move to, adjourn this regular meeting right now at 10:57, we'll reconvene closed session. So this meeting is adjourned. Thanks, JC. Thank you, Jason.